Good evening, everyone. I am so happy that you are joining us for a second night of excellent conversation. This has been a very exciting Black History Month. And of course, because it is Black History Month, we had some extra episodes of the Black intellectualism movement just so we could really dig into celebrating our culture and learning together and growing together. And so I've been very excited about some of the amazing topics we've been able to discuss this month. And so I want to just first express how excited and honored I am to have tonight's guests. You all have seen the flyers and, of course, the post about having Mr. Kevin Douglass-Greene here tonight, who is a descendant of the amazing Mr. Frederick Douglass. And the reason that we are, it's so important to have conversations with the descendants of our great history makers is because we know that history makers usually try to keep a firm foundation and legacy going that helps us to remember why our ancestors are so powerful and so influential and what beliefs we need to keep going forward as we try to evolve as a people. And so we have some wonderful questions to discuss tonight, and I'm not going to waste much time because we have an hour and a half, and honey, you know we get excited on the Black intellectualism movement. So I'm going to start first by sharing a little bit of the background with Mr. Kevin Douglass-Greene. He has dedicated his life to serving this country and his community. Uh, Kevin is a native of Seaside, California. He is a son of Robert Greene and Jean Douglass-Greene, and Jean Douglass-Greene, the great granddaughter of the Honorable Frederick Douglass. Kevin served 20 years on active duty in the United States Army, serving as a role model for soldiers and civilians alike. Throughout his career, Kevin devoted his spare time to promote self-worth, pride, and education in young people through various programs and sharing the legacy of his great great grandfather, Frederick Douglass, former slave, abolitionist, and statesman. Kevin was born in Paris, France in February of 1961, and he is proud to celebrate his birth in the same month as his great grandfather. There's a few other things we wanted to make sure to share. Following his retirement from the Army in 2003, he moved his family to Murfreesboro, Tennessee. I'm sorry, no matter how many years I say that word, I still always struggle. He continues to touch the lives of people in astonishing ways. In 2006, he graduated from Middle Tennessee State University. And during his tenure as a collegiate scholar, Kevin presented the Douglass Tree to students and faculty at the MTSU Undergraduate Social Sciences Symposium. And since then, he has done recently really picked up the traction with sharing more about legacies and what we as a people must do to continue moving forward. And I we had the chance to read some fascinating articles on Google. And I want to advise you all to please check out the work that he's doing because he is making such tremendous strides to keep the legacy going forward and to create his own legacy for his family. So we're so thankful to have you tonight. Is there anything that I didn't share about you that you would like to share?
God, Jamie, thank you. Welcome. I like to welcome you to your show. Uh,
Well, thank you.
no, I think as far as I'm concerned, anything else, you did a good job referring to my bio information I provide. So I think within our conversation, there are pieces within the conversation of information to include me that will come out in the conversation. So I think we can just go right on with it.
Well, let's get to
Okay.
it. Our first question is what or who influenced your commitment to sharing your great great grandfather's and your family's legacy?
See, told you I'd get me in there somewhere.
Get
No,
right into it.
yeah,
Waste no time.
yeah. No, well, that question has a couple of parts to it. So, basically, I'll start out with, you know, when and how did I know that I was a descendant of Frederick Douglass, and where, how did that click in? to my brain as it being important or something like that is basically so like you mentioned, I grew up in Seaside, California, and as a military community, very diverse, probably the most diverse military. Fort Ord, California was probably the most diverse military base, at least in the Army. And we've had conversations, many of us has had conversations about that. Many of us that grew up there about, and this might kind of divert, but it still stays in the same realm of dealing with history and everything, the Black history, is
Absolutely.
that you would find, I mean, if I was to show you my elementary school picture, I mean, it when you say melting pot, all I have brothers and sisters that are Filipino, Japanese, French, German. You know, a bunch of them are interlaced with black and white. A lot of multicultural families, and California being what it was in the '60s,
Right.
compared to the Deep South, and a lot of the Army bases were in the South. Uh, so you found a lot of military families that were interracial ending up in California and in Monterey Seaside. So there is where that pretty much leads, like I say, leads into my how I am as a person. I was raised as Kevin Green. A lot of people, over time, when I go back and have become more public about being a descendant of Frederick Douglass, I've had people that said, "Yeah, I remember you telling us that." I've had educators and friends saying, "I remember you saying you're a descendant of Frederick Douglass when we were in school," where it really, I think there was pride in it, but I really didn't understand
Mhm.
what it actually meant.
Right.
So, diverting from that and how I got that mentality of just being me and growing up as me is that's the way my mother raised me.
Yes.
See, my mother. She was born and raised in Washington D.C. So she
Okay.
grew up. When I say she grew up as a Douglas,
I was
her
about to say, which
her
is yeah.
yeah, her father. I mean, her father was an educator in Washington D. Everybody knew the Douglases in Washington D.C. So, as I say, she grew up as a Douglas her whole life until she left there. And then when she got married my father and moved overseas, and then they ended up on the West Coast. Um, she was removed from that. Even though she knew who she was,
Right.
she didn't. I
Right.
mean, she didn't have to live that every day. She was able to live as Jean Green,
Yeah.
which in retrospect was fine with me because that's the way I enjoyed being. Enjoy being me
Right.
before I
Right.
have to put on the hat. So there's a lot of people around here. I can go places, and some people know who I am. Some people don't, and it's I'm cool with that if they don't, and so that's just part of that legacy. So what happened is I I noticed that with some of my cousins also, we grow into the legacy.
Yeah. Yeah. I like
So it
that.
wasn't until I was in the Army, I was married, I was in Colorado. I just decided some of the artifacts my mother had, I brought them back to me with me to for Black History Month. I put them in the library, and the whole idea was just to show this information about Frederick Douglass. And they wanted to do, the newspaper wanted to talk to me about everything. And do I talk to people? No, I just put it here. I just want people to see it. I had never done any speaking about it. And then after that, so basically for the next probably I had next 15 years of my military career and probably over I would say a good 30-year stretch, did a whole lot of a lot of speaking all over the world, Germany, Korea, Puerto Rico, all over the United States. And I really enjoyed it. And then over time it was important for me to figure out, I, not to just tell a history story about
Yeah.
Frederick Douglass, because what I do now is I try to influence or get people to learn about Frederick Douglass himself.
I like
When I
that.
say on their own, I emphasize special things about him, and then I emphasize his books: The Narrative of the Life of Frederick Douglass, My Bondage, My Freedom, Lifetimes of Frederick Douglass. Those three books. Read them from the first one to the third one, and see how his vision and retrospect on life and of being enslaved and being a free man, all
Mhm.
that information changes as you grow. The reality doesn't change. The perspective
Yes.
perspective of it changes as you grow. So
I like that.
so that's why, I grew into where I am now, and and also being able to collaborate with my cousins, uh, Nettie Washington Douglass and Kenneth Morris Jr., who are also my Douglass descendant family, and they are also related to Booker T. Washington.
Okay.
Um, so with the Frederick Douglass Family Initiatives, I am a senior advisor with the organization, and that's how some of the stuff I do with the Frederick Douglass Family Initiative. So, and there's yeah, a lot more than history with FDFI. It's has a lot of other. Uh, its umbrella is a lot bigger than just the history of Douglass. So,
What I really liked about what you said was when you said that your mom had the opportunity to really come in, like in a sense, come into herself
hmm
independently, and then you had that opportunity to become Mr. Kevin first,
yes,
and then realize what it means to also be a part of my family tree, right? And so, how do I get to do that as my authentic self?
hmm
Is really what I hear you say,
yeah.
and I
And,
like that.
and so I was saying, and that is like my cousin uh, Kenneth Morris, um, and his mom is, again, his mom grew up as she grew up the same as my mother did. They both grew up in Washington D.C. Even though my mom's about 10 years older than her, she remembers my mom very well, and they all grew up as Douglasses. Now they moved to California also. They lived in L.A. I never knew them growing up, even though they were down south of me. But again, Kenneth, it wasn't till later in life with him doing the other things that he wanted to do in life, just
Mhm.
as on his own. They then, as later in life, created him and his mother created FDFI, because it's like, okay, now what do we do to extend this legacy? It's more than just running around telling people about Frederick Douglass,
Right.
and that's like, my uh, basically my conversation is the Douglas tree. So I talk about very little about Frederick Douglass. I like to talk about more about other parts of my family: my grandfather, my great grandfather, my uncle, my mother. That's the parts that I really get hyped up about, because that's information that a lot of people don't know.
Absolutely.
Frederick Douglass, I mean, like I said, he. You want to learn about him? You got to read him. I can't tell you about him. I mean, I
Right.
learned a lot, most of the stuff about him, the same way everybody else does about reading books. So,
And I guess the first hand component, though, is also realizing, in a sense, those values and beliefs that have been passed on generationally. And I think that's kind of what sets it apart a little bit.
mhm,
Is that, in a sense, it's still a model for mankind, right? So that gives you a bit more of the intimate component that a lot of us, as we go along this journey, really, really need, especially as we're trying to figure out in 2022, like, how do I create a legacy?
you're
How
right.
do I ensure that I too am leaving a mark that my kids want to talk about, years from now? And how do I make sure that I am investing the right way in the future? Like, what things have been done throughout time to make this happen? And some of the questions we have will definitely explore that. And hopefully bring to light a lot more wisdom about how we can not just talk about breaking generational curses, but actually like hear a timeline that shows us how these things happen. So I'm going to go to the second question.
That's great.
Can you share the story about how the Douglas house and the Highland Beach community came to be. I was so, now that was new. I was not familiar with the Highland Beach community. I was so amazed by that. So I would
Okay.
love to hear that story.
Oops, I dropped my notes. Nah. Well, we'll start when you say the Douglas House. I'm assuming that you, and I don't want to assume, but Cedar Hill in Washington D.C., which
Yes,
is the
yes,
national, yeah, which run by the National Park Service.
yes, yes.
So, just moving back just a little bit, is Frederick Douglass. I mean, they lived in Rochester, New York,
Okay,
for I'm thinking over 20 years, and that house burnt down at some time, and they moved to Washington D.C. and they actually lived in a smaller house closer to the Capitol building,
okay,
and then they bought the house up on Cedar. It was called Cedar Hill. We called it
okay.
Cedar Hill because of the cedars that are around it. And if you've never been there, it's a beautiful piece of property. The way it sits on the hill, and you can just see all. He just you know what they call the line of Anacostia. It's Anacostia over on that side of the river, but it's just beautiful piece of property. So he lived there. I believe. Let's see. I did have notes, so that was important. Uh, Wrong one. Okay. Yeah, so roughly around 15 years is where he actually lived in the house. And his first wife, Anna Murray Douglass, who without Anna Murray Douglass, there would be no Frederick Douglass. So that's a very, very important point. And we are bringing Miss Douglass, her history out for on her own merit. That's one of our goals. But as far as the house, he was living there when she died, and then he remarried not too long after. But he died in 1895. So along the way, his second wife, Helen Pitts, still advocated that to keep the house because people wanted her to sell it, but she advocated to keep the house. There was the Frederick Douglass Memorial Association, I believe it was, and then eventually the National Association of Colored Women um, pretty much took over on trying to keep the house up and
Wow,
respectable, to
wow,
the point where in 1962 the National Park Service, there was federal you know federal signing, because there's a picture of I believe it's JFK and a bunch of people around his desk, and my uncle was at that meeting at the time where they signed the house, basically in the law, not in the law, but made it to part of the National Park Service, and that's where it is today. And nice visitor center. The house is there, very, and it's just a legacy, and I think a lot of pride for the people that live up in that
absolutely,
area, even
absolutely.
though unfortunately, they people talk about, and this is just one of those facts that it just happens to be, and it wasn't that was the way it was then, but it happens to be one of the most impoverished areas
Wow.
of Southeast Washington D.C. that it's in, but that's just what it is at this point. So
Now, yes.
now with Highland, are you were going to say something, or are going to move on?
Well, I was about to say just the concept that you talk about, like how important it was for people to protect that, is so important as we talk about some other questions coming up. So I just wanted to emphasize what you talk about with people realizing how important he was, and so wanting to protect that home, not just for children and grandchildren, but for the legacy for this country.
Hmm.
So I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, that's fine. And I think what's important, part of the I guess I can't sometimes words miss me for some of the things I want to say, but just thinking about 1962 is when they did that for Frederick Douglass's house. And then over the years, throughout Washington, D.C., the Mary McLeod Bethune home, Carter G. Woodson home. So all these different, because I did all these, other white, history folks in history have, Washington D.C. is just peppered with so much history that you walk past homes and don't know they used to belong to somebody. I mean,
Yeah.
friend I stayed with, Frank Smith, he lived right across the street from Jesse Jackson's mother, and the
Wow.
house right next to his, which was, which the whole time he was there, I think it was owned by Howard University, but it was a shell of the house, but still, it was the property. It was the property of Mary Church Terrell.
Wow.
So,
Wow.
yeah. So that, yeah, just to see, and as time goes along, that they say, okay, this particular property is important. That particular property is
Yes.
important because that
Yeah.
person was important, and there are people that still think it's important, and they want to go see these things,
Mm-hmm.
even though it's just a little house in a block with other houses. It's still important. So they've been increasing that over time.
Okay.
But you know, moving on to the Highland Beach community,
Yes.
uh, it evolved out. What's interesting when I went back and reread this, but my great grandfather Charles Douglass and his wife were in the area, and they wanted to go down to this beach and enjoy this little amusement area, which was white only. Uh, and not a whole lot you can do about that
Right.
in the late 1800s. I mean, even though we went through Reconstruction and blah blah blah, we still run into that today. So you
Exactly.
imagine.
Exactly.
So it just happened to be just on the other side of this creek, property that was actually black owned. So there was this Highland Beach property was actually black owned by someone else. And over some months of conversation and stuff, that Charles and the gentleman uh, worked out a deal, and he bought the property. And over time, so that was the late 1892. So by 1895, and people started building building property on the, he was selling lots, and there are so many different, between the residents and guests of Highland Beach. So let's just first, I'll go into how the properties were on. I don't know if it's called Front Street, but anyway, it's a very narrow. It's like a shotgun community. I mean, it's only like three, four houses wide in the front block, and then over there's some others on the other side of the streets. But there's two main streets, one going up and one coming down. But in the front is the Frederick Douglass summer home, which was built. Charles built it for Frederick Douglass, and it was situated with a eastern exposure. This one particular room, up at the top of the home, where Douglass was going to be able to sit in his rocking chair and look over the bay, Chesapeake Bay, over to the eastern shore where he was born and spent, his childhood. But Frederick Douglass died before the home was finished. So over years, you're talking about, Frederick Douglass died in 1895. So between time of years, the house was actually lived in and not lived in and out of, disrepair. And as houses go, it takes a lot to keep them up. And eventually they had a someone get the property and rebuild it to where it is today. Very, very beautiful home, and it's actually a museum, by appointment museum. So next to that house is the Mary Church Terrell house. The person who lives in it is Mr. Langston, who is a descendant of there goes my Langston. You not Langston Hughes, but because Langston University in Oklahoma.
Yes, the family.
Like, yeah, that link. I just can't think of his first name off the top of my head right now. Maybe somebody can put it in the chat for you, but it'll come up with it. And then next to that home was the house my grandfather lived in, uh, Hallie Douglas, and my mother spent all her summers from a child till she left Washington D.C. At the beach in that particular summer home. And at the time, during those times, those homes were basically summer homes. So a lot of people, the residents and guests, Mary Church Terrell and Judge Terrell, Booker T. Washington visit, W.E.B. Du Bois, Paul Laurence Dunbar, Langston Hughes, Alex Haley, all, and we're talking about these, this is basically pre 1960s
Yes.
folks visiting the Highland Beach, because it was an exclusive black. It had an inn, a big inn. It wasn't just family residence. It had an inn for people to come visit, um, and they would have. I mean, just thinking about when my mom telling stories, other people telling stories, because I was there this Labor Day. We stopped and visited, and just to see the people that remembered my mother and my grandfather, and tell the stories of what it was like to grow up in Highland Beach. I mean, it's not the only exclusive black summer resort community, in the United States or even in the Northeast. But this one, I guess I would say, is different based on who created the community. It was a Douglas,
Absolutely.
and I know one of the questions later, kind of, I can go into some other specifics on, like you said, there's segues into other information that I'll hold off and talk about. But that's pretty much, Highland Beach. And if you got another question pertaining to it, go ahead.
Because I think the thing that I loved about hearing that, which it does come back around to, is about black property ownership, and we'll talk about land and things like that. And that's one of the reasons that Highland Beach was so amazing to read about, because you have black dignitaries, who have basically said that not only are we talking it, but we're also walking it, basically. And that's basically one of the ways that this community comes about, and they get on board for it. So of course we'll come back around to it. But
And it's amazing when you think about the distance, you know, from Washington D.C. to Highland Beach. If you get on I think it's on the 50, and it's no traffic, you can get up there, and probably from Northwest Washington D.C. up to Highland Beach, probably in a good 30 minutes to 45 minutes, depending on traffic. And then it's over an hour, depending on traffic too. But, that's today's roads and vehicles. But, back in the day, and, we're talking about pre car, when it was, horse and buggy, and then, the cars. So the amount of time it took to get there was, compared to going somewhere else, was, not that long.
yeah,
Hey, we can go to the heat, we can go here, it belongs to us. We can go, and they, like I said, they pack up the house, probably, and it depends on, um especially with the males during that time, they might still be working. A lot of them were judges, and so didn't all, even teachers get the summer off, but they don't have summer off, as you know. But the children and the mothers would stay up there during the summer, and the men might have to come back and work during the week, then come back on the weekends. But from my understanding, yeah, my mom, they would, pretty much spend the whole summer up there.
awesome. That's awesome. So everybody that's aspiring to have their summer home vision, it's not a new thing that starts now. You can start looking back at what our ancestors have done before us to build these communities and these summer home lives. Like, it's very doable.
Yeah.
And we hear people all the time talking about how you want to do something different, owning multiple homes, and we think it seems out of reach. And so that's a testament that it can happen. So next question: What personal gratification do you feel about your family being a part of this well-established community, and why do you feel that way? What gives you that sensation that you get when you think about something like this?
Uh, part of it is just to think that, I mean, people talk about it, amazed by it. There are people that are, that still live there. But what's important to me, the community isn't, Highland Beach isn't just a Douglas community. Because for one reason, no Douglases live there now. I mean, part going into some details of the other question. I don't own property there. Um, but there are a lot of families that from the beginning, there are say legacy families, so original families that still own their properties there. And so over the generations, the property has been able to roll over to those, uh, to those people. And so there's, I've seen where there are, people, like a lot of people that my mother grew up with that went out, did their lives, education, business, whatever, and were able to have the ability, and it's not everyone had that, the ability to come back, convert their homes into year-round homes, and actually make that their retirement homes. So some of the homes we go, when I go there, there are people that they live there year round, and some of them, are original property owners of the families. So I think that's what I think is the more important about it, is that
Mm-hmm.
the families that created the community, because you still had to have, he still had to convince people that this is a good, what's the word I'm looking for, a good investment,
Yeah.
to be able to own your property here, where it's located, the price, you know, who knows what their thoughts were, over 150 years ago
Absolutely.
on, when you first started it, is like, this is going to be a legacy, everybody's going to know about this community in the year 200, 2020, where still a lot of people don't,
Yeah.
but that's really not necessarily, I mean, it's a bad thing as far as, but it's, it'd be a good thing just for people to know that
Absolutely.
it's there and how it was created. That's
Right.
the important thing about it. But yeah, there's a lot, like you said, it was interesting, and a lot of people find that it's interesting to find out that it's there and what was the story. So that, to
Right.
me, that's the most important part, is what was the story, and that there's, you know, other people that has just as much pride, they have just as much stake in the history and the story of Highland Beach than any of the Douglases do.
Yeah.
There's a
Yeah.
lot of other families, Weavers and all those. Yeah.
Mhm. I love it. Well, I told you before, like I was really just so just moved by the story of creating that Highland Beach community. And one reason is because there are so many Black families who are selling land and properties. I've had a lot of conversations with people who say, my family owns 125 acres or 75 acres or 200 acres, and either they're having a fight through this with multiple family members who want to sell the land, or it's tied up in these communities where a lot of times, white men and women who have power are trying to fight with them to get that land to develop it. And so many people are throwing in the towel. They don't want to fight with family, so they sign off and let them sell it. They don't want to have to go up against this person that may be influential in the community, so they just figure out what to do to give them what they want. So my question is, what is your advice for people who are in this situation where they want to keep the land, but they're kind of like, do I fight for it or do I just go with the flow?
Well, I answer this question, hindsight's 2020, as they say. And in retrospect, I know back in probably 1993. I'm rambling because I'm thinking out loud. So probably mid 1990s. Uh, our property that my grandfather's home that was when my I believe when my uncle passed away, he had the property, and then when he passed away, it went to my mother. And over time, between taxes and what it the up cost and everything, because the taxes there are definitely not weren't cheap, that it just got to the point where that the house, to try to keep it repaired, try to keep someone in there, it just became too much for my mother, in my mind. And so, she really wanted to keep it the best that she could, but living in
Absolutely.
California, it was really, really a strain. And I was a young married E5 in the army, and I was like, Mom, don't just we at a point we just gotta let it go. um Go ahead and sell it. We know that it's so what ended up happening is I think the contract kept the foundational blueprint.
Okay.
So somebody bought it, rebuilt. They had to keep the foundational blueprint of it. So um I think this time, I think it might have had, since that time, might have had been flipped to but two other owners by now. But still, that property's there. It's a whole different house now. Um, but it's one of those things there that what's nice about it. It's not like, I know here in Tennessee, with same thing. You drive down through the out in the and next thing you know, the next week all the trees are gone and they're building a subdivision.
Yeah.
I mean,
That's
my
what's
dentist
happening
was
right
telling
now.
me, my dentist a couple of months ago was like, "Yeah, I live well," because my wife we're looking for downsizing with some land, so we're looking to go smaller house, but maybe get a couple of acres somewhere, which is not easy, but anyway, and stay in the general vicinity of Tennessee, Kentucky, Middle Tennessee. Uh, but to me, to give people that advice is, to say that, well, we sold ours, and it wasn't for the money.
Yeah.
It was because it was such a strain to try to, and the resource to. I mean, when I think now, well, if I knew the possibilities of different resources and stuff, to maybe try to keep the property and things, but to take on the cost myself at the time, and I was living in Germany, by the way, and what my mom was already trying to do to keep it, it just was. I mean, when I say it wasn't worth it, it just wasn't worth the strain on her to do that, and I just wasn't in the position to do what I would have liked to do. So that was the reason for us giving up the property. But it's not one of those situations where it's it's now a parking lot or something. It still has that. So for a lot of people, you wouldn't have known the difference. That house is not the Douglas house anymore. So it didn't distract from the aesthetics of Highland Beach. It's still Highland Beach. It's just that house, that property belongs to someone else now. Um, it just so happens my wife tomorrow, her brother and her going down to Union, outside of Uniontown, Selma, Alabama, and that's where her mother grew up. Her mother and father, but her mother's family, they still have what's called the home house. So they still have acres of land where the house that her mother and siblings grew up is the home house. So that's where they all go Fourth of July, and unfortunately for funerals. So they're going for one of her aunts passed away. So that's where all the sibling, all the family have a plot on that land. So they still own that land. They've done work with the house. So, fortunately, I don't know the ins and outs of any dealings with what they do with within the family of making the decisions on what to do with the land or the house and everything. But from what I know, the consensus is they want to keep, and I think they actually uh, rent because I don't know how many acres it is, but it's a lot. It's farming land. So I think
Okay.
someone rents the land. Someone
Okay.
renting the land to someone who actually farms it. So someone's actually farming the land, and I guess paying them to use it. So they're what's it called sharecropping. they're doing they're doing the reverse now.
Like,
That someone
yeah,
else, yeah,
times
someone
have
else
changed,
is
right?
paying them for to use their land. So it just depends. I've seen going back to California, I see California is very expensive.
Hmm.
Um, when their house that I grew up in, my father sold that a couple of years after my mother passed away, and again that was his prerogative. At this
Right,
point, I had my own family. I wasn't planning on coming back to
right,
California,
right.
and he ended up getting another house, which is fine. And then when he passed away, based on the amount of time that he had the house and how much it cost, and I have a house here and what it costs to either rent or do other things and have a property manager and I'm not discouraging folks, but what it takes to manage a house that you're 2,000 miles away from,
Yeah,
that was a just something I didn't want to take on, so I ended up selling that property. um but I've seen, I have people, I have lots of come left, done things, come back, still have their family homes, even though it's 12, 1,300 square foot homes, but the price keeps going up. They're seven, 500, 7,500 to $1 million homes that people probably paid back in the 60s when they bought them, might have paid $50,000 for. But so for me, the idea is you just got to figure out what is financially and stressfully uh, best for yourselves and your families to be able to do it. But what I realize now, there's programs and there's different ways to do it. So throwing in the towel isn't something I just say throw in the towel, but just find out what your options are. When your options turn out to be might be beneficial, might not be beneficial, but that's the choices they got to make.
I like how you urge us to be basically financially responsible in making those type of choices, and saying that as much as we might like to keep that, you really have to weigh what the pros and cons will be for you. And not just keeping that piece of land, but then that piece of land is overgrown, or you have to try to manage it and it's taking a chunk out of your income that you need. And even hearing you give the example of, well, my family, you know, did sell this house, but my wife's family kept this house. So I like that concept, because I think that sometimes that is the really hard decision that people have to make. And when we talk about full families being involved, then just because I can afford it doesn't mean that these members of the family can afford it, or that they have the ability to also make sure that we manage this correctly. So I really, really like that concept of you saying you have to make the decision regarding what's going to be best for you and what's going to be best for your family. I like
Mhm.
that. I like that.
Yeah, and for me, I would say, I mean, I don't say I'm lucky, but because I was a smaller family, just me and my sister. That decision, and when my father passed away, I was the only living person of the family left. So pretty much all the decisions at that point were up to me, pertaining to my father's estate. It was, that was. all up to me. And then, again, with that decision with the Douglas land, I think my father was pretty much, you know, that was pretty much my mother's decision, because that was her. It wasn't just, and I know to her it wasn't just the land, it wasn't
Right.
just the house. I
Right.
mean, but she could always come back. I mean, she could come back to
Right.
Highland Beach.
Right.
She just could. I mean, and the house wasn't what it was when she grew up. I mean, it
Absolutely.
was it was very, because like the last time I saw it was really bad disrepair, because even you get to the point to where, between taxes and the way the house looks and all that stuff, you know, some people tiptoe around so much, and not necessarily tiptoe, but they just can't, to the point where you end up losing it altogether. I mean, you don't even get money
Absolutely.
out of it.
And I was going to say, then you really get,
Intimate
you really
domain,
lose. Right.
or
Right.
they figure out, hey, well, hey, they've been watching 10 years this property.
Right.
It's like, I think the city could do something with this, and so they're not paying the taxes and stuff, so I think we can just take this. And so, yeah, you do run in those situations too.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay. So then I have another question that talks about legacy and identity. So um, sometimes it's challenging for us as a Black community to be able to find our people because
Hmm.
we have been split and shipped all over the place. And we have a lot of technological advances like the 23andMe kits, which are a booming popularity, especially among the Black community. How important do you think it is for us to understand our lineage in terms of success and positive self image?
It's interesting because I like, one thing I like is watch Skip Gates' show, um, Finding Your Roots. And he deals with all different
Yeah.
races, and men
Right.
and women. It's interesting just to, and the power, just what the resources that he has
Mm-hmm.
is, I would say, in some cases, depending on how hard and how much you dig, we have just as much resources he does,
Right.
in some cases. But just to find, just to look at, and I know they're all quote unquote celebrities between entertainment, politicians, blah blah blah. Um, but just this, the idea is that, find, because I realize some people are scared to find out stuff,
Mm-hmm. Yes.
because
Yeah.
their lives,
Mm-hmm.
their lives are, in one case, their lives are so good
Mm-hmm.
that they don't want to find out that it wasn't always this way
Yeah.
for their families.
Absolutely.
Um, some just don't have the passed down family history to know where to start.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So that kind of lets people, some people are just like, well, I'll just go from here. I create my own legacy. I don't know what
Mm-hmm.
it was past there,
Mm-hmm.
because I don't know who my daddy was. My mama wasn't my mama. We find out all these different things like this, and so they just don't try. But I think the interesting thing is just to see, like I said, just watching that is be able to see people find out things that they didn't know,
Yes.
and just realize that it was what it was. I mean, you see people find out, this friend, it's interesting because, uh, white people. Well, there's a good chance you're from the United States from for the last 300 years. There's a good percentage that your family might have owned slaves. And if you're black and your family's been in the United States for over the last 300 years, there's a good chance that your family might have been enslaved. And that's
Absolutely.
just one of those common things
That's it.
we just,
Mm-hmm.
but to find out that, when they do those different they things, and then to come to find out, well, you actually got some black blood in you. And be like, somewhere down the line, you've got this 3% of sub-Saharan African blood in you. Where'd that
Uh-huh.
come from? Don't worry about it. If I mean, it ain't that this day and age, you don't have to worry about the one drop rule.
Exactly.
Back then, if you didn't want to let that out back in the day, because you find out, ooh, I got 1%. Yep, you're back of the line. so, so it's interesting to me. With me, it's easy as far as the Douglass line. It's documented.
Right.
It's one
Right.
of those things that I don't have to prove.
Right.
Even though sometimes I'm talking to people, the conversation might be on a plane, conversation goes blah blah somewhere leads to, and I try to figure out how do I put in a conversation. By the way, I'm great great grandson of Frederick Douglass, because I've done that in some cases, and people is like, well, okay, like who's he? So I'm not. It's not. Doesn't. Why be surprised when people don't know stuff that you
Right.
know?
Right.
And you would think people would know, you know, and you've seen the different what Jay Leno used to do, and they go ask people
Yeah. Yeah.
state state these different, the Constitution, what's different, and people don't know because
Have no
that's just
idea.
not part of their lives. I
Yep.
mean, it
Absolutely.
directs their lives indirectly, but
Right.
they just don't have, they didn't go in a way that was top shelf information that they had to
Right.
remember every day. They just
Right.
you learn it, you put it in the back of your brain, and you move on.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So the importance, it's just interesting that it can. Unfortunately, I don't really see how it use the term make or break people. I think the most it can do is make you.
Yeah.
Because what other people did back so far back, it is what it is, and all you can do is you learn it, you find out about it. It might be something you don't want to tell nobody, and you don't have to. Um, but in most cases, it's something you can tell people. You might be able to laugh about it. It's like, you find out whatever. Because I forgot what the lady's name. The last one I watched, that she was the director of Boomerang and the modern Boomerang. But she has Native American in it, and she was like, "Wow." And all this, there's a lot of black folks that say, well, I got Native American. You find out, no, they
All black
don't.
people believe we have Native
Right.
in
And
our
then to
family,
find
right?
out that, yeah, she actually has name. And then John Lake was Amo to find out, that both
Mm-hmm.
his family, I mean, he's got so much indigenous. He's,
Mm-hmm.
when they was looking at his stuff, you always think about, well, the Spaniards and all that stuff, blah, blah.
Yeah.
But he was, he has so much, he can say, I am a Native American, even,
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
from the Americas, because you have to include Central South America as Americans.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And We
I am a
forget that.
native indigenous
We forget that.
American.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And it's so I
Absolutely.
think from me knowing what I know about myself, and then seeing other people find out stuff just in that realm. Again, it's just one of those things where, I mean, if you really don't want to know, then don't. Um, but some people, you might have some folks in your family that, because again, people are finding out these things about people that murdered people or had three families or all these different things that you
Yeah.
have no
Yeah.
control of
Yeah.
now. Um, but unless it's going to make a difference in your, you know, I see it. It'll always make a difference, but it's how you let it make a difference.
It's
You
how, oh, I like that. It's
let
how
you
you let it
let it
make a
make
difference.
a difference. Yeah, because
I like
history
that.
is what it is. That's like when you go into the other pieces of history. History is what it is. It's
Yep.
just a matter of what what we know, and what we don't know, and then how it's how we get it out of the closet per se,
Yeah.
so
Yeah. How to
everyone can
deal with
see
that.
it, and
I'm
then
with you.
you just got to deal with it. but that
I,
doesn't, you know.
I was on social media the other day, and this guy has been doing some lineage digging on both sides of his family, and he had been sharing it actually via TikTok. So sharing all these new things that he was learning, and he all of a sudden had gone missing for like about 3 months, and then he finally logged on, and he shared that when he started digging on the other side of his family, he found out some very, very dark secrets that were so dark. He even cried when he just shared a little snippet of it, and he said he had such a hard time processing it. And then I thought the thing that was kind of enlightening was that he said that he didn't want to give up, but it just kind of set him back to find out these parts. And he even said, it wasn't anything that he felt his family could have controlled because of the times they were in, but it sometimes doesn't stop you from feeling shaken when you discover some of these stories. But I like what you say, that it's about how we let it affect us. I like that.
Yeah, that's like with Pharrell when they did his story, he had to stop.
Yeah.
I mean, there's some people can work through it on the camera.
Yeah. Some have to,
But
some have
Pharrell,
to
he's a musician. He's not, quote unquote, an actor. I mean, he said his emotions. He said, I have to stop.
yeah.
He said it
Yeah.
just got to him so much that he had just needed time to process, and
Yeah.
that's the way it's going to be. People are, receive things differently, and you just got to figure out what your process is to do that.
Absolutely. 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 I like this comment here. Our roots are so important to know whether it is a plus or a negative. We have to be proud because we are here, and there's a diamond deep within. I thought
Hmm.
that was a good one too. That's a good one too.
Hmm.
Okay, so let's get to the next question. And this goes so well with this next question. In today's
Okay.
generation has shifted in how they believe we should talk about Black history. Many have expressed a desire to omit or talk less about the slavery aspects. They want to hire more about these vigilante heroes. And what I have seen is really, even if it means fictionalizing Black history, and we're seeing a lot of that happen.
Hmm.
Do you agree or disagree with people saying, well, I don't really want to talk about that component. I want to hear more of these vigilante stories or these Black hero stories and less about the things, the other parts that went on?
Well, this is one where I had a couple of notes on. It's the difference between this. When we look at history, the difference of history is the story and the storyteller. I mean, we've part of it when I look at you say, okay, well, Frederick Douglass was able to tell his own story.
Right.
And so outside of that, there are segues because he didn't write about his every second, every day of his life.
Absolutely.
That you'd see people writing books about Frederick Douglass because they do research about the political realm or religious realm, all these different other realms where you find documentation and information about an individual based on someone else's information, like with Lincoln.
Right.
You go
Right.
into Lincoln, and over here you keep finding Douglass, but it's not necessarily stuff that Douglass talked about in his life, but this is information that was part of Lincoln's presidential library that included Douglass or something like that. So again, like I said, the story and the storyteller is what I talked about. Going that we had slaves and we have enslaved. So now people are like, when you talk about slaves, slaves doesn't. I mean, again, this was my pick. I'm describing my picture, the difference between the two. So I know a lot of it. We've trying to go away from being slaves to being enslaved
Yeah. Yeah.
because the
Absolutely.
pronoun of how it describes
Mm-hmm.
describes
Mm-hmm.
humanity. So slaves had no identity. You know, if you paint a picture, no identity, no faces,
Absolutely.
no, they're on ledgers as property.
Mm-hmm.
A man, woman, boy, girl.
Absolutely.
That's a slave. Enslaved. Enslaved people have identities. They were mother, father, sisters, and brothers.
I like that.
and you can paint a picture of it. And you can take that same family, and you can put these are slaves, and you can't identify them. Then you take the enslaved family and you paint a picture of them. Okay, they were in slavery, but they were still individuals. They were still human beings. You could put
Absolutely.
a beard on the father, put a hat, you can put a dress and a broom or whatever in the mother's hand. You can put, in the children. You can still, children during still had little dolls. Girls had dolls. You see pictures with, I mean,
Yeah.
they were still children. I mean,
Yeah.
they were still individuals. They were people who were enslaved. They were victims of the circumstance. I mean, that's like we were talking about the lineage and stuff of people finding out stuff, and I know it's hard, and I know probably, I think, we're talking because you're in Louisiana, right? You said,
Absolutely. Yeah.
yeah,
Mhm.
about, people, it's like, to find out that black people
Yep.
owned black people.
Yep. Yep.
I
We hear
mean,
those stories. Mhm.
that was, I mean, again, this is where you realize how much of economic system slavery was,
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
black people owned black people because it was economical.
Yeah.
I mean, they just happen to be in the position to where they can own people too, to do the same thing that the other. It's still oppressive. I mean, there's still, you know, it was still slavery. You know, it was, the whole idea that the economics was part of it. Wasn't just that it was an economic thing. It was, I mean, because you can take the difference between, okay, if it was just economical, why you got to treat people so bad?
Right. Right.
You,
It's a
you
power
know,
system.
yeah. I mean, these are human beings. I mean, even, I'd say even today that, unfortunately, I mean, we're dealing with the enslavement, says that you treated animals better than you did human beings.
Absolutely.
That,
Absolutely.
I mean, that's part of the pitiful thing about it. And so, again, going back to the original question, um, the story and the storyteller. I mean, if you're going to be a storyteller, you're going to have to you're going to tell the story that you want to tell. But now we have the ability to tell our own stories. So if we want to tell about our heroes and sheroes, um, more than the, more than, than the Mandingos and stuff like that, then that's the power we have now, is to be able to tell the diverse amount of our stories is that diverse that, yeah, go ahead and tell those stories, but we still got to realize all the other parts that we came from. I
Yes.
mean, those people, those heroes, uh, came from somewhere. They came from somewhere. Now they might have been fortunate to come out of a piece of within their history where their lives weren't as impacted as others were. But again, my thing is tell this because we didn't have the ability to tell those stories before. So I think it's that wave, to where the little waves
We
kept
finally.
hitting the
Yeah.
shore, and you had the breakwater out there that wouldn't let the big waves in, and then finally someone takes down the breakwater. Big waves can come on, and
Yep.
I live on the ocean. So I grew up by the beach. Take that breakwater down, those big waves can come on in, and you can
Yep.
get hit, and you can surf those big waves if you want to. So black people surf too, even though I didn't. But yeah, go ahead and ride that wave. I mean, I have a problem with it. And I think part of, with anything is in with the laws, and what we have the ability to do, is that we're going to, in my mind, especially as an older adult now, I can look at movies and things and say, dang, I could have got the same story without the F's and B's and
Right.
S's and all that stuff. I could have still got the same story. But of course, for someone else, they enjoyed it.
Right.
So you do
Right.
have those,
You tell it
those makers, those filmmakers, those storytellers that can tell the same story in different ways. So you look at, you got your Richard Pryors and your and different people. Use comedians for example, because they control their craft so much
right.
that you have
Right.
all these different people. I watched these different other comedian shows where they don't do cussing and stuff, that they're just as funny. Um, but some things, there's just some things about the hood that you it would there's some stories that just would not be the same
This won't be right.
without that piece of fatback, without that bacon. I mean,
And look, that thing that
sometimes
really
you
has
can,
some pizzazz to
you
it,
can go
right? Some
vegetarian all you
flavor
want.
to it.
I mean, you can throw some turkey necks in there, but it ain't the same as a ham hock.
It's not the same
They're not
pizzazz.
the
It's just
same.
not.
So
And our people like that pizzazz.
yeah, so
I think that the thing for me is when it comes down to it, I always for my vision, I always see my people as heroes. I always see them as heroes, even if they're not the name that stands out, even if they weren't the one that ran away, because I think to myself, just making it every day
hmm
with this type of back breaking, soul breaking work, and still getting up and saying, my kids depend on me, my grandchildren depend on me to stay alive.
excellent point.
I can only
Yeah.
see them as heroes because I think to myself, like, how would I have ever made it? How
hmm
would I have survived? And thankfully, because so many of our ancestors stuck it out, I don't have to live that life because they kept going.
hmm
And so, whether they had the chance to be a front scene activist or hero that did something that became publicly known, or they were just working the field each day, for me personally, I feel that every single person that just kept getting up, kept going to the field, kept trying to escape, kept trying to change the system, like all of them are heroes. And I don't see any less of a value to a person. I think enslavement narratives are important because they remind me of my responsibility to be a productive part of society and to live within my full purpose. And it also gives me a clear understanding of exactly just how difficult things were for my people. So if they can survive it, then I can overcome these challenges as well.
Yeah.
So I really thank you for the way that you brought that to us. Like, at this point, it's all about who tells the story. And I think that's the thing for us. Like exactly what you said. We finally get the chance to like have a say so in our story, and we are ready to make it big.
Yeah. So that's
But
for instance, like Cabin in the Sky. Who
uh-huh.
directed, produced all those movies? I mean,
Uh-huh.
that wasn't us telling the stories, because we wouldn't have, I don't think we would have told that same story the same way.
Yeah.
That was white people. I mean, because it's interesting, because I know I watched Turner Classic Movies, and I know I can't remember the lady's name who deals with the older movies. Oh man, she's an excellent historian. But it was you look, one thing that they were talking about blackface, and blackface, is it's hard to imagine it as being a, what's the word I'm looking for, uh anything good.
Right.
um and a lot of times they used it as satire, as as like a
Mm-hmm.
joke.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, and I hate to use the but um because one of the things they pointed out is they talk about how much Fred Astaire admired Bojangles, But in the one production they did that he was representing Bojangles, he didn't. They talked about how Bojangles always wore a suit and tie. He was always just as dapper when he danced as Fred Astaire was. And Fred Astaire was, I mean, I love the way he always dressed in his movies. But when he did Bojangles, he did the big collar, big bow tie. He did the and it was like, man. And they were talking about why if you say you're going to like represent somebody or do
Mm-hmm.
something that's like
Mm-hmm.
you're saying that, yeah, I think he was such a great dancer and that I want to do tribute to him in a dance that I make it look like a joke.
Yeah.
And that was, that was, yeah. But yeah. And so going back to that, when people were doing, even saying allowing us to be in the movies, we made a movie about all black people, but we made it the way we wanted it to look.
Absolutely.
And so now we've over the years we've had, and I really enjoy that Denzel is doing all the works of, was it
Yeah.
August Wilson?
Yeah.
He's doing all the works of art, and he's and then
Please.
all the other direct feet,
Mm-hmm.
this, and what's it really is because I don't pay that much attention to it till I actually see it to realize how many female producers and directors and
Mm-hmm.
writers are doing stuff, and they say, "Dang, I
Mm-hmm.
didn't know she did that.
Mm-hmm.
She did that, and she was doing
Mm-hmm.
that." I was like,
Mm-hmm.
"Wow!" So that's encouraging for all y'all people out there, young and old. And I know that goes into another segment.
It
Segment
does. It
question.
does. And let me segue and say this. I have people who are asking questions in the comments, but you guys, we have some questions we already laid out, and we're already not going to finish our
Yes, I
conversation.
know. We
And
hour and a
we are
half go
so
quick
sorry
when
we
you're
don't
having
get
fun.
to them. I told Mr. Kevin beforehand, I said, look, I'm telling you right now, we start talking and people say an hour and a half, and before you know it, it's like, oh, time is up, and they'll be like, what? I was just getting down into it, and that's how it goes. So I'm gonna bring two more questions to you because it's 8:12, and I usually use about the last 5 minutes to close out and do a
Yeah.
tribute piece as well. So I'm gonna do two more questions, and so the first one I'm going to ask is, so let's do this one. Your great great grandfather was the director and had an amazing impact on the expansion and rebound of Freedmen's Savings and Trust Company, which amassed about what is today about $80 million during its prime. And so there are currently 144 minority banking institutions. Approximately 20 of those are Black owned banks in America. Together, they have about $322 billion in assets. Why is it so important for us as a Black community to increase our relationships and investments with Black banks?
Now that's a question that's not going to take me too long because transparency, honesty. That's not something I've really have focused my mind on. I mean, that's a question. It's like, wow, that's interesting. So me to have, I mean, so for me to have a long, like some of my other answers that I can dive into and just start pulling facts and stuff out. Um, Again, with him, dealing with the Freedmen's Bank was an interesting dichotomy because, of course, that the Freedmen's Bank failed, and when he went into it, he was he found that internally, I think it just wasn't going to make it anyway because internally it just wasn't being done right. I mean, even we can be trifling with ourselves. I mean, so I think that was the hard part during that time
So
frame.
do you think it was an internal like culture problem, or do you think that because what I was reading as I was like digging more into how the Freedmen's Bank was set up, I
Mhm,
questioned, was the bank ever really set up to succeed? Because I
mhm,
felt like, especially around the time um, that Frederick Douglass was doing so much work, I really feel like there are so many things that were put in place just to say that you did it, but they didn't necessarily always expect Black people to really excel.
Mm-hmm.
So, which do you think it is? Do you think it was internally us not doing our part, or was the bank ever really set up to truly be successful?
I think part of it is that we couldn't totally that I think, and I haven't read a distinct history of it, but even the freedmen couldn't rely on just all black people to succeed. During that time, we
Absolutely.
black people just couldn't. I mean, it's not that we couldn't rely on each other. It's just the way the system was set up. We just didn't have that complete foothold to say that as a black entity that we. It doesn't mean that there wasn't instances where it couldn't happen, because you had Black Wall Street and Tulsa and all the different other places where um, black communities and everything were able to come together and exist on their own. Uh, but to go expand in the Freedmen's Bank, I don't know. I mean, just I think really the right answer on this for me is to say I don't know. So um,
We'll be digging some more then. That's
yeah, that's the
it.
honest truth on this one. I just don't know enough
I
to
like that.
to really go in deep into that. So
I like that. I like that. I sent you because I'm a links person too. I sent you a little link that I found very interesting as well. Just about where we currently stand in terms of financing, and it kind of shocks me. We always hear about the financial power we have, but it
hmm
still kind of shocks me to actually see the numbers in print. And I just always think about how throughout history, our ancestors have repeatedly talked about us as a community understanding the power and value of our dollars. So I definitely thought about that question because I'm like, a lot of times we think it goes back to Dr. King talking about, bankings and pulling our money out. But if we go back to your great great grandfather, he was actively engaged in a system that was supposed to be about financial empowerment for Black people. And so I think that that's the real beginning of seeing that we have to do things to try to take control of our finances and really figure out in the end how to make it work for us. Because I think what you say is absolutely true. What you say about um, us not necessarily having the foot power alone to make things happen is 100% true. That's just a realistic component of it. Being the portion that we were in this country, being underpaid grossly during that time, having land strips from us, we just weren't in the position per se to be able to maintain something like that. Which brings me back to the mindsets that I still wonder, was it about saying, oh, we gave you something, okay, now be quiet because we did it for you, versus actually expecting the Freedmen's Bank to be able to sustain.
yeah,
So I like that. Okay, so since we're now at 8:17, and I want to make sure we honor time, and I know that you're okay. So I have one more question. So can I
yeah,
ask you too? Because I
yeah.
wanted to. Okay, so you and I talked about homeschool before this, and you were sharing with me how four of your children at least have been homeschooled. So I wanted to bring that question to you. I told you we had a guest before, two guests ago. We talked about homeschool. And so, what is your opinion and perspective on the benefits of homeschooling, especially for Black children?
Okay, well, I'll go back, just try to make it quick, but how we got started, because uh, my wife wanted to be a teacher, and so she had started with our first child. She started, we did the daycare stuff and all that, and about time when it's time for her to start looking at um, preschool and everything, my wife had started doing some substituting. And then through that, and probably knowing some other homeschoolers, people she knew, she
Mm-hmm.
just decided that she thought she wanted to homeschool our daughter. And we've just been so fortunate, for one, that we've lived in states, Oklahoma, Oregon, and Tennessee, that are pro homeschool. They're very pro homeschool. So
Oh,
we never had any issues where we lived
I like
with
that.
the systems of homeschooling,
Wow.
with
Wow.
having to deal with, we still there's still laws and legislations and stuff, and we fought. We haven't had a problem with reporting or just doing. We're not out there saying, okay, we're just going to do our own thing and we ain't telling you
Mm-hmm.
anything, and
Mm-hmm.
don't come bothering us, asking us what we're doing with our kids, because they're our kids. My wife still goes out, does curriculums and all that
Mm-hmm.
stuff and reports and everything, and she's reported to the county, reported to different ways, done different curriculums.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not that you've stuck with one way and say that this is the only way to do it.
Mm-hmm.
We've dealt with other homeschool groups and individuals, so a lot of our internal friends, I'd say 50% of who we know are homeschoolers somewhere along the way.
I like
So
that.
our kids, so actually we did 5 of our kids homeschooled. It's just my son is the only one who's gone to public school. So when he became middle school age, with the interjection of sports and stuff, even though homeschoolers can still do sports, they opened it up where homeschoolers can do
That
sports within
that's
the
cool.
within the counties and stuff. It's still a little bit different. You've got to be the exception to the rule to take, in my mind, to take someone else's spot as a homeschooler. You're not just average
That
Joe
people
coming
do.
in. You've
Right.
got to be exceptional to
Right.
say, okay, he doesn't even go to school here, but let my son who goes to school here play, and he's sitting the bench, type of thing. So yeah, so we let, and my son, so let's go real quick down there. My oldest daughter homeschooled all the way, went to college, graduated from college, and now she's a mother and wife and mother. And she was a speech and language. That's what she was doing until she had her children and COVID, blah blah blah. You know how that deals with getting kids daycare and all that stuff. So she's a stay at home mom, and she's homeschooling now. Then we had 2 daughters. That one, she, you know, went through, didn't want to go to college. Fine. Had another one that she actually wanted to test out early. So she tested out at 16. My wife
Wow.
said, okay, go. You completed everything I gave you. You're done.
Amazing.
Go
That's
on. And I just move on to the next one. So now we have our youngest who's still here homeschooling. Um, using a lot more technology now than we did originally, because we started before we had computer in the house. So now using a lot of computer based stuff. So and with it was interesting. It's like all of a sudden, woo, kids that have to go home. It's like it's kind of like me. Been working from home before COVID started. So with school, it was like, we're good.
yep.
I'm
Yep.
already at home working.
Already
I'm
normal.
I'm good. We're already homeschooling. No, nothing new for us. We just keep on going. So I've seen a couple of homeschool moms that actually became consultants, because there were people out there that was just pulling their hair out, going,
Oh.
I don't know what to do. And unfortunately, and it's not always all the school's fault, because the schools thought they had the infrastructure technologically to
Yep.
deal with they needed to deal
Yep.
with at the
Yep.
time. And
Yes.
then they come out and it's like, woo, we don't have what we need to get all these kids at
Mm-hmm.
home. And
Mm-hmm.
it's not the school, it's just so fast that it happens.
Yep.
you know they they,
Yep.
they, they just got to catch up. And I know it was
Absolutely.
very frustrating for teachers and parents, systems going down, all that different stuff. So
Mm-hmm.
I just, we haven't had a problem with it. We know very successful Black families that's done it. And with having multiple children, the directions that they go afterwards doesn't always mean that they've got to go to college. It's just that my wife says that we've gave you the within, just within education and Christ, we give you the foundation. What you do
Mm-hmm.
with it once you become an adult is up to you.
It's up to
But
you.
we did what we thought we were supposed to do.
You dropped that wisdom for us right there. You dropped that wisdom, Mr. Cabin.
It's up to you from
Absolutely.
here. You walk out the house, go on. Okay, you're always welcome to come back and visit. And visit. But the choices you make when you leave this house are your choices. That
That's
doesn't
right.
mean that we have to. Yeah, that was your choice, not ours.
I like that. I like that. That's the truth. And a lot of parents carry a lot of burdens when they see oh, things didn't go the way I planned or thought they would. But what you say is, we teach you and you have to make your own choices. And I like when you said that, knowing other Black families who are doing the same, because we've been on the conversation about homeschooling, just in recognizing that sometimes that's the best way to meet the needs for Black children and children of color. If you feel that they're not getting the one-on-one guidance they need, or if you feel that the school is just not meeting the diversity needs that you would like to see. And so a lot of people, I've had a lot of people ask me questions. I said, well, this is a conversation we need to push forward about people who have actually experienced this, who have actually done this as well. And my son is enrolled in virtual, which means basically I do the instructional component for him. But prior to that, I actually had taught virtual school for a year and just loved that experience behind it and what it means to kids and what flexibility it gives for parents to engage in a different way. So I was so excited when you said that earlier, and I thank you for sharing it. So here is the final question.
Well, just real quick, and it just happened. I think it was yesterday, Wednesday or yesterday. A friend family of ours, because my wife was out doing something. They came, picked up my daughter up for homeschool PE. I mean, so
It's so cool.
yeah.
That's so cool.
So yeah, we know people. They get out. She does stuff. It's not it's not a barn. So anyway, go on your next question.
It's not the way people used to think,
Yeah.
So, in addition to this being Black History Month, your great grandfather's birthday was on February 14th, and your birthday is this month as well. So, in honor of this being such a fantastic month, what programs and initiatives can we contribute to and support to keep your work and his legacy moving forward?
Okay, so for time wise, okay. FDFI, Frederick Douglass Family Initiative, fdfi.org. That's the website. So this is, like I said, the organization that my cousins created, and it is the mantra of it is to eliminate modern day slavery and sexual trafficking. So that's the big picture. Okay, so there's so many hundreds of years later, different forms and fashions, slavery still exists. And it's always existed, as far as labor and sexually and all these different ways. It's always been that way. It's just that now it's just in a whole, you see it in a whole different light, but same thing. So that organization is to do that. So we have educational programs that schools can jump on board with to try to get children. So young people learn from young people.
Yes, they do.
They do. So if you can teach young people how to recognize and realize the dangers and different things, and and teach other children to the same things, then we have a foothold starting here going forward. Like the Douglass it's easier to build strong children than to repair broken men's women. So we adding that women piece in there now. So teach them while they're young to do the right things, and later you don't have to come back trying to teach an old dog new tricks. So
absolutely.
And within that we have the 1 million abolitionist project. So this book here, The Narrative of the Life of Frederick Douglass, specially print edition of this book that we're trying to get out to 1 million children or young people across the world, to where we have people, organizations or individuals sponsor this book. They buy, you have to buy by the case in most cases. So and then we highly suggest to say that once you do that, you're doing this to get the books out to young people, and the young people don't have to pay for the book. The person sponsoring is paying it for the children. So recently, a guy here in town, I went to something. I had a couple of books to give to children just for showing up during Martin Luther King Day events that were going on. And I'd known him for a while, but he's like, hey, okay. He said, well, I want to buy a case of books and I want to get them out, donate them to the school libraries, so that the library can have the book and a lot more children have access to that book. So just by getting this book into a library, thousands more children have access to the book. So that's one of the things that we have. Another one is Frederick Douglass on the Hill. So in Easton, Maryland, that's where Fred Tuck Hope County, where Frederick Douglass and the Bailey family still exists there. Frederick Augustus Washington Bailey, his original name. So my cousin Terrence Bailey has Frederick Douglass on the Hill project there. There's a mural that was just unveiled on Labor Day of Frederick Douglass and family members, and I just happened to be in the mural also. So trying to make Easton a destination for people to learn not only about Frederick Douglass history, but about the history of that community. Harriet Tubman's from that area. So there's a lot of history within places that people don't realize and see the connections till they actually dive in and see stuff. And another thing is I do United States Colored Troops, Black Civil War soldiers. I participate in that in different realms. So and that's very important. Just how happens in Nashville this week, the Nashville Scene magazine had two of my compadres on the front cover talking about the history of USCTs in Nashville and the Battle of Nashville and all that stuff for Black History Month. So
that's amazing. That's amazing. So I urge everybody to make sure you go back, check this out on replay. I'm going to snip this clip in particular so we make sure we understand what programs are out there that we can contribute to, what places we can go visit, and what information we can be gathering as well when we go out there, because this is really awesome information. I want to thank you so much.
I don't want to go now. I don't talk a lot.
I don't have a problem with you staying longer because we can roll out the rest of these questions. But I try to make sure I stay within my word.
I am fine. No, honestly, I am fine.
Okay, well,
I don't have nowhere to go. It's dark outside. I'm not going.
Okay. So let me do two things then.
Mm-hmm.
We have one question. So first of all, let me express this. What you just said a minute ago about the sex trafficking advocacy work that you all are doing actually links into the question that my mom has asked more than once, which was, what are your thoughts on the most recent finding of slavery in Georgia, where a man had been kept enslaved for more than 50 years? So I believe that we just got your response on that, because you are actually doing advocacy work to help with modern day sex trafficking and enslavement. So is there anything else you wanted to say? Because I feel like you answered that.
Pertaining to that, because I went through that pretty quickly. Well, I mean, like I said, the whole program on that is that there are a lot of programs out there, individuals and organizations, and I think one of the things is linking everyone together. There's, I mean, overseas. Transparency here. It's amazing. I think about when I was in the military, and the military played a big part in sexual trafficking. Believe it or not, whether they did it, they didn't realize they were doing it. But just think about when, we were overseas. But for instance, when I was in Germany, and it's sad now when I think about it, but we were in Frankfurt. Used to go. So anybody's on that remembers Frankfurt and blah blah blah. Used to go to Sachsenhausen. Sachsenhausen was this area where they had the red light district, and they had apartment buildings that were using was brothels, using the easy term. So you go in there, and to us, and this is sad to think that my mind actually thought about it like this, is that my money was my money was too valuable to me. So just put that point out. But to me, I used to look at it kind of like Disneyland, or going somewhere to amusement park where you didn't have money to ride the rides, but you'd go in there anyway just because it was fun to look. And we'd go, and just to realize that at that time, I didn't think about what these people's, that that these ladies didn't want to be here. There are
Mm-hmm.
ladies that thinking about what human trafficking and sex slavery is all about. That these people came from places that they would never see again, and so that was my young days of not realizing the impact that the
Absolutely.
military had on this industry. I mean, the same thing in Asia. I'm sure the same thing in the
Mm-hmm.
Gulf.
Mm-hmm.
That it's just I was reading stuff about that they would you know you become for you're coming in for a job and you're going somewhere, and when you get there they take your passport and everything stuff away and you can't leave because now you thought you were something that was legit and viable based on
Mm-hmm.
all the information
But
that
they
was
took.
provided,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and you got catfished. And so um yeah, so there's organizations. I know there's a young man over in England, I believe it is, that's doing some. I don't remember the name of his organization off the top of my head, but this is a young man that's working. That's basically the face of this organization to help stop human trafficking. Um, the FDFI is working with Ireland and all these different countries. And I remember, I mean, I grew up in Bangkok, Thailand, in 1970. I spent a year there as a kid, and it's just amazing when I think about now that my parents used to be able to even you, you would never even you only think about doing that in the States now, much less in Thailand. They used to put me in a cab and send me to the bowling alley or somewhere by myself. 10, 11-year-old kid. We used to ride our bikes around. I mean, that's just today's you just
You can't do that.
fathomable to think about. Yeah,
Yeah.
that you can't do
Impossible.
that with your kids. Like I said,
Mm-mm.
where I grew up, everybody has that. You know, I know just about everybody in the community I grew up. We have the same memory about what it was like to grow up
Absolutely.
in Seaside, California, to where we came home when the street light came on. No, we came. Here's the difference. We came home when the 5 o'clock whistle went off,
Okay.
because you could
Okay.
hear that all over town. And then you went in the house when the street lights came on. And we rode our bikes all over the place. We trick or treated over the whole. I mean, we didn't just not our own neighbor. I mean, we trick or treat from 5 to 10 o'clock. I
Yeah.
mean, we had 3 bags of candy and stuff. I mean, just all
The
these
good old
spots.
days, as
I
they
mean,
say.
like I say, just the good old days. And you'll see people on Facebook write a summary of stuff, and it's the same thing that I've thought about over time, and then just thinking about all the friends and stuff that I
Absolutely.
had, that this inclusiveness and the freedom we had, and just and I realized it's just that my kids can't do the
Can't do.
same thing
Yep.
that I
Absolutely.
did in the ways that I did, and it's sometimes it's sad to think about that, but
Mm-hmm.
in the same thing that my mother's generation, and you go back beyond that, depending on it, and then again, it all depends on where you live too,
Mm-hmm.
because we were able to do things in California that kids in the certain
True.
places, not
Very true.
only in the South but in other
Yeah.
cities, could not do that. I mean,
Yes.
they stuck within their boroughs and their
Yep.
communities and and their projects. Our project, because people come and used to look at our project. We called the projects our our low income housing.
Uh-huh.
Be like,
Uh-huh.
you guys call those projects? Well, they're the lowest income stuff we got in town. Well, y'all want to see projects? Come to Bikini Greens and was it in Chicago? Go to Detroit, New York, Queens, all those different go all those different places. You want to see projects? So, hey, it is what it is. I know I was rambling there, but I just was nice
No,
to
no,
tell my
no.
story. So,
It made sense in the fact that you say, you were talking about how times have changed, and even when you brought up the projects, I always tell people how I grew up in the housing projects. and but I came from a smaller town. And then when they see them, they'll say, "Well, these don't look like the housing projects." I said, "Well, it may not look like what you see in a bigger city, but."
Yeah.
So I that definitely tickled me when you said that, because I can
Yeah, because our project was
relate.
two. I mean, they were only 2 stories, and that was just one
I
apartment
was
on top of the other. So it
too.
wasn't like a 10-story
Yeah.
building with
Yep. Yep.
yeah,
Pretty well taken care of. So that didn't look, didn't look like what we read about or heard about in the music, of course.
yeah.
So you kind of segue, like you just segue so well to the next question, because I wanted to go to this. America is currently in a very rambunctious place between people who want the truth about America's history and racial experiences, and those who are satisfied with the whitewashed versions we've been receiving for so long. And so, because we're in such a rambunctious place, what do you think will be the keys to gaining a sense of balance and kind of across the board respects again?
I wrote down the truth about all American history. I
That's it.
mean, we're talking about everybody.
Mhm.
Everybody has their has their place in the sun and has their you know shadow
Yeah,
under the moon.
like that.
And that's just really trying to figure out how do you do that when
Right,
not everybody wants to.
right,
But
right,
that's the key. I mean, and I'm not saying that you take the individuals out of, say, like people want to do is just say, okay, it's American history and we're just going to call it American history.
right,
There isn't no
right,
Asian history. There isn't no Black history. There's
right,
no Latino
right.
history. It's all American history. But, you know, in a lot of communities, a lot of, and then I'm not ethnic, but a lot of what's the word I'm looking for? Um, a lot of people of different origins
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
still celebrate their heritage, E-
Right.
even though they've been in America for umpteen. I mean, you got. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, I know that you know Irish, Italian.
Yep. Yep.
I mean, that's
Yes.
even they're
They still.
strong with
Mm-hmm.
the different things that they do. Um, even though and what's interesting about it is I guess what's interesting about it is they do it and they don't care what everyone. If we're doing it, and if you guys don't want to show up and enjoy it with us, then the hell with
Right.
you. But we're having our Italian
Mm-hmm.
day, we're having our whatever day, and they move on with it. But within America, I think the difference is that
Mm-hmm.
they came here as immigrants,
Mm-hmm.
even though I mean they more or less had there was I'm not saying everyone, but
Right.
there were choices.
Right. Right.
I would say again you see stuff where you have people come and go 4 different times.
Right.
They came to America, did what they tried to do,
Did what they tried to
what they
do.
could do. They go back
They.
across the water home,
Right. Right.
and then 10 years later, like they show them on the census that they're back in the United States again. But they had the freedom. They had the freedom to do
Yep.
that. Not
Yep.
everybody had the freedom, but how many enslaved people had
Uh,
the choice to say, okay,
exactly.
I've been here. I want to go back home for a little while.
See
I
how
go
that works
home
out.
and I promise I'll come back in 10 years. Um, and I'll bring some more of my family with me. So, we can get this joint really, I bring back more. We can really get this whole thing going. We can double the what we're doing right now. we're going. That's that entrepreneurship thing.
Right.
Right
We
there.
can get to
We're thinking
negotiate
ahead.
like that. We
Yeah,
can.
we're
If you
you
just let
know,
me go back home, I can pick up some folks and come back in
yeah,
about
yeah. Say I can
10
get.
years or so. We
Yeah, well, I can go home, have some more children back to bring them back with me.
come back, hook you up out here. No,
Yes,
we didn't get to
I
do
done
that.
doubled your yield here. I so how that sound? We just didn't, had the in a lot of most cases didn't have the opportunity to do that. So
Yeah. Yeah.
so that's one of the things when you talk about the the term Black history and African American history. Because of course, African American history started at a timeline.
Right.
There's a timeline for African Americans,
Absolutely.
and then the Black history involves Africa. I mean, it involves Africa,
Right.
and it's interesting because I was doing here at Middle Tennessee State University. I'm on the Black History Committee, but one of the young ladies was talking about, she was, I forgot where she was from in Africa, but she says trying to deal with people's perception. Okay, well,
Mm-hmm.
some people just see her as black, and so she's supposed to automatically identify as black and know everything about being black. When she's African,
Mm-hmm.
that's
Mm-hmm.
her
Mm-hmm.
heritage,
Mm-hmm.
and they don't necessarily understand that she still needs to be proud about.
Absolutely.
I mean, in my mind, a lot of times, I mean, I think most Africans is like, hey, I'm African, especially when they're born in Africa.
Mm-hmm.
I'm African first,
Right. Right. Right.
and there's no problem in saying that.
Right.
We, being part of African Americans is, they want you to say, a lot of people want to say, well, I'm American first,
Mm-hmm.
but how long did it take to be able to for other people to say, well, you're an American first?
Ooh, that's a big one.
Why you
That's
want
a
me to
big
say I'm
one.
American first and you wouldn't let me be an American first? I had to be a boy first. I had to be
Ooh,
whatever first. And now you say I've got to be an American first.
preach, preach. Well,
So
and it's the part about other people continuously feeling like they have the right to decide our identity instead of letting us own that, and we do deserve it. And what you said, just that was wow, right? I
yeah.
had to be all these things first before I could even be American.
Mm.
That's a big one. Wow, 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 wow. And that's I mean, because
Yeah,
it's
you get me. See, that's what they get me to thinking and
all the
talking. And,
times that we've
yeah,
been through, go through my mind, colored, Negro, the other word, boy, slave. Like I through my mind when you said that, it just started going through my head. How many things have we had to be to even get to the point where they're even willing to consider us as American? And then when you talked about the term black, and I still stand by this, and I've said this recently. I said, do we realize that we believe that everybody that was on our ship came to America, but do we know for sure that all of our family members actually landed in America? Because most times now, when you say the term black, right, it's not just United States. We're talking about Caribbean, like everywhere that enslaved people were shipped to.
no,
Black history has a presence.
right. The Caribbean, they had twice as many land in South
Friendship,
all the islands, Barbados, all that,
yeah,
than
all
the
those
land
islands.
that were in America.
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, so that's one of the importance of the knowing the transatlantic uh,
Slave trade. Yeah.
slave trade is that you know typically everybody hit hit south before they came north,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and so that's interesting. And why? Well, 'cause this is when I went to it was like I've been a lot of different countries, and at that time it was interesting that I went to while I was in the army. I went to Puerto Rico for a week to do some Black History stuff down there, and honestly, at the time, it was the most comfortable place I ever been because no one. not necessarily no one, but just based on how westernized Puerto Rico is, because
Mm-hmm.
it's a basically a colony of the United States when they say it should be a state. But anyway, um, that based on appearance and dress and
Mm-hmm.
the the all the shades of skin tones, no one knew I was Black American until I opened my mouth to talk
Right.
that I don't speak Spanish.
Right.
And so it's like I could just walk around here and people, I've been in Germany, people, based on typically in Germany, because you're typically in Germany, Korea, blah, blah. Most time you're in uniform, especially, in Asia, there's not that many Africans in Asia. So you're most likely Black and you're in the military when you're
Right.
in
Right.
Asia. Germany Germany and Europe in itself, you do have a lot of folks from the mother country, from the nation, the continent of Africa, that because a lot of people sometimes would ask my wife if she was African just because she was much dark, she's darker. They would think she was actually African. But even there is like pretty much they know that they know you're not German,
Right. Right.
and even you still have the interracial stuff of children being born over there from
Right. Oh yeah.
generations, but still, uh, they knew just based on being a soldier, the way you dressed, your hair, everything, they knew
Right.
you're American.
Well,
So in Puerto Rico, it was like they really didn't know until a point where you actually stood out as American. It
yeah.
was like,
Like
that's cool.
surprise.
Like, hey,
By then you got comfortable. By then relax, take your shoes off, let your hair down.
yeah, yeah. So that was interesting.
So we had another question from the audience, and he asked, "What's your position on the debate of W.B. Du Bois, and Booker T. Washington at this point in our history?"
So dealing with the education and the what was the other thing? Trying to think of the word. Basically working a trade. So I think what that was the debate. Um, it's interesting that you say, would why can't you do? I mean, there's of course they had their ways of thoughts back then, and the access of the ability of access and all, because sometimes it's hard to put 20th century experience into 21st century logic,
Right.
22nd century, whatever century we're in. Sometimes it's yeah, sometimes it's hard to do that, but nowadays it's what's the debate when you really could do both if you really
You can do
want
what
to.
you want. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean there's a lot of just uh, just see how much education actually goes into some trades. I mean, I mean, I think that's
yeah.
the link between being the doctors, the lawyers, and the uh, going being engineers and stuff like that. It's still, I mean, if you have the ability to make that choice, I think that's what's important. It's you even have the choice to do nothing if you want to. Not everybody like it, but
That's not what we advise, but yeah.
yeah.
And I think that's the most important component of it. I think that we as a society also have to get to a place where we recognize everybody as valuable, regardless of the choice they make. And when we change our mindset, I think that we'll move outside of debate about what's going to be best for a person, because we see value in everybody and we respect them, and so then we honor what they do. I think that's the biggest problem. It's not about what's going to be best, because what's
Hmm.
best is an individual notion. I know I taught high school, and I had students that would tell me instantly, like, I always wanted to go to college, but I didn't think I could do it, and then that student will land a scholarship. And then I would have students that say, well, my family is pushing me to go to college, but that's not what I want to do. And then, we talk about trades and look at that. And I'm looking at what they have the potential to make coming straight out of a trade as a welder. And I'm like, look, you're eating up my little paycheck already. So I think
Yeah,
it's
that was what was that one thing I seen is that yeah, I'm a what was it? I'm a doctor. I have like $500,000 in student loans, and I make blah blah blah. Well, I'm a engineer or whatever, and I make the same or a little bit less than you, but I don't have any debt. So who's actually more wealthy? Who's actually,
I mean, true. Who is above
yeah,
the debt ride,
right. Yeah. So
So I fully agree with you on that. Well, I am going to actually go ahead and read our poem. I think I've asked every question. Yeah.
I got a thing to say that I usually
Okay. Go
that I
ahead. Go
yeah that
ahead.
it kind of goes back to the it's easier to build strong children than to repair
Yes.
broken men type thing, but I
Yes.
use this quite a bit because when I went back to after I retired from the army, I went back to school as a non-traditional student, and it was interesting that I was kind of like in the same boat I was when I went to college the first time when I
Mm-hmm.
was out of high school. It was like, what do I want to major in?
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, I really
Mm-hmm.
when I went back to school the second time is really I just one of the things was is yeah I really want to get my bachelor's degree. I want to graduate. I want that's just I mean just that type thing. But the idea
Mm-hmm.
was well what I want to do. I was like really there wasn't any particular field that I really wanted to go into. But I knew I needed to go ahead and get my bachelor's degree. So I did university studies, which is basically life.
Mm-hmm.
And with all the college I had prior to going in the Army and the experience from the Army, I was able to use that and get my degree in university studies, which once I did that, I uh, applied for a job. I'm with the Department of Veterans Affairs for 15 years. And that was just that education
Component. Right.
footnote that I needed to check off, which was a good, it was a good thing professionally, but it was a good thing internally to say that I still went back and finished what I started originally.
Right. Right.
Uh,
Right.
but when I was, of course, I'm back in school now, and I'm 40 something, and I'm sitting there watching, a lot of some of the stuff I did is as a 40-year-old, it's like duh stuff. It's like, especially in sociology type classes and
Right.
stuff, this is
Right.
just life experience that these folks ain't experienced, and I have. So I'm sitting, I'm in this like interesting, and so I used to tell her, I say, it's like that mama used to saying every everything you learn today is not meant to be used today.
Yes.
Don't learn it, you never have the opportunity to use it. So I
Yes.
used to tell them, it's like, how kids talk about, well, why I gotta do geometry? Why I gotta do because it's requirements to graduate. Do it, graduate. If you don't need it, oh well.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But
Mm-hmm.
somewhere around down the line, if you do need it, you've
I like it.
experienced it.
Mm-hmm.
And so don't get caught up don't get all spokes everything's caught up around the wheel because you're
Yes.
trying to figure out where do I use this.
Yes.
Well, you use it now to get where you need to be right now, and if you don't need it later, don't worry about it. But you've accomplished it, you've got to where you need to be on. And if you if and I hey, I'm sure you can contest, and there's people out there, and I can contest it, where it's like you're sitting there and you're in an experience where, wow, I remember somebody telling me about that. They told me not to do
I
this,
remember when. Yeah. Yeah.
and
I
I was
remember
like,
when.
and either it's either one of those things you were paying attention to that
Mm-hmm.
is like, wow, yeah, I remember, or it's one of those things where you thought you really didn't pay attention to, And then it's like, okay, I remember now that I was, yeah, but, and again, that's like the thing that I was saying with, like kind of my wife's philosophy is like raise a, I can't remember the quote of it, but to raise a child in the way that you would want them to go. And after that, they're going to go the way, I mean, they're just going to go. And if you still got your life to live, and unfortunately, I mean, not unfortunately, but actually, fortunately, there are those, there's those grandmothers and everything that ends up raising kids because they need those children just need someone. There's just those circumstances where they're blessed that there is a family member there that can do that for them.
Mm-hmm.
But in some cases, as you know, it's just that some people think that is their birthright, that they
Yep.
can have children and say, hey, grandma raised me,
Hey, somebody
so
else raise
so
them.
grandma's gonna raise you.
Yeah, yeah,
But
yeah.
it's, yeah, like I said, there's, you can't, you can't throw those circumstances under the bus because they've been beneficial
Absolutely,
to people, but sometimes people
absolutely,
use that as a, one of those generational curses, that this is just the way it's supposed to be.
absolutely,
um, Even though they have the opportunity to do things other ways.
absolutely.
So yeah, so that was, like I was saying, it's just that, don't things go around to where if you stress about especially when it comes to education. I mean, I know it's hard. I know there's things that you got to do that are hard physically or hard mentally. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but they're, either you're going to complete that requirement and get where you need to be,
Yeah,
or you don't want to complete that requirement and you quit. Doesn't mean that you can't still get to where you want to go, but
right.
um just don't let that be the reason for you to quit. Is because it's something that you don't think is valuable.
Yeah,
'Cause just because
absolutely.
it's not valuable to you right now, um for some reason somebody put that stuff in, well, in a lot of some cases, some people put that curriculum in there because they think it has some value somewhere.
It's, like
But
they
I
said,
there's,
cupcakes.
yeah, there's some classes like, okay, we just, yeah, we're just giving you something to do as electives. And it's interesting because, one of the things, the job I'm in, or when I retired, I started driving a school bus when I retired from the army, and I was a recruiter before I retired. So I was a recruiter for 3.5 years before I retired from the army. And so when I retired, when the first job was, I said, "Ooh, buddy, need bus drivers." So as a recruiter, I used to see people that come, and you can't blame people for thinking, "Okay, what am I going to be able to do with this job field?"
Right, right.
I don't want my son to be infantry. He can't get a job as an infantryman. Well, in a way, I can see that. Other than, there's a lot of other things that go with a lot of other stuff in the military that you don't see as valuable later, but they are. But what I did is I was in field artillery, so I drove this big tank looking thing around called the MLRS launcher, and another truck, big old truck that carried ammunition. And
Mm-hmm.
so I was also, I worked in EEO. I was, supervisor. I What else did I do? Actually drove a bus in the army over in Germany. Real nice Mercedes buses. Ooh, those could turn
Oh,
on
it
a certain
wasn't.
amount
It
of
wasn't
time.
big yellow.
But no, these were big commercial buses. That's where I learned how to drive buses. So when I got out, so all this different stuff that I did, I was able to get a job not based on what my actual job was. My job was sitting in front of this little computer, it looks like a laptop, and launching rockets out the back of this this thing that can kill people 100 miles away. I mean, that's that's not a job you get when you get out the army. But all the
No, it's no
no, but all
specification
the
for
other
that.
stuff you learn in between is where the value comes in, and it's all a matter
Yes,
of what
yes.
you try to do within that. Because like I said, when I went
You are
down, told them,
preaching.
okay, here's what I used to do. They said, okay, you got to do like a week of training. Someone's going to train you to drive the bus and blah blah blah. I got in the bus with this guy, older guy. We drove around for one day. He drove me through town. You know how these small southern towns are with the circles and stuff in them. He drove
Right.
me through there. We got back at the end of the day. He told the supervisor, said, we need to get him tested as soon as possible. He doesn't need any training. He knows how to drive. He's drove buses in Europe. The towns are smaller than the ones. So I knew how to drive through small towns. I knew how to do, so it was a matter, I had the experience. So that experience paid off for me. And then in the summer, I started working as a park ranger for the National Park Service, which was really fun. You get to, I'm not much of a real talkative person except for when I get in situations like this, but um, no way does the military know you're a descendant. Yeah, they do, because they used to pay for me to go places. So
Oh,
yeah,
really?
someone might request me to come somewhere in the military might actually you
That
know
is amazing.
they might actually, if they put in the request, right, the military would pay for me to go. Like when I went to
Wow.
Puerto Rico, the military, the EEO in Puerto Rico actually requested me to come to Puerto Rico. So it was a military to military deal that I when I went to Puerto Rico. So there was certain situations where where I didn't get paid to do it because the military, I was going on
Nah.
the military's
Mhm,
dime, so they
mhm.
couldn't pay me anything to do it. But yeah, so there, it's doesn't surprise me at all. Yeah, and again, there were it's all about the circumstances of when people know
Absolutely.
I'm Frederick Douglass. It was like, yeah, going through every day, like I said, even today, a lot of people didn't know till it was time for them to know, where it made a difference. For people to know that I'm Fred, it usually is, to me, is where it can make a difference.
Yeah. Yeah.
If it doesn't make a difference for you to know that I'm Frederick Douglass walking through the grocery store, then. But it was fun. Where were we at one day? We were at something, and I had a shirt on, a Frederick Douglass shirt, and I was there with my brother-in-law. And actually, we'll say, because the entrepreneurial thing we didn't get into, but I was
Okay, I'm gonna come back to that one.
yeah,
Okay,
but
go
I was there
ahead.
with my brother, and I was standing there. We were talking, and there was this guy. He was talking with a friend of his, and he said, "It's interesting. You actually resemble Frederick Douglass." And my brother-in-law looks at me, and we just kind of start laughing, and he just looks at him because he talks probably less than I do, and he just says it in nice. He is. And he's like, "What?" He said, "Yeah, I am related to Frederick Douglass." He's like, you look." He told us, "Why look? Doesn't he look just like?" He was
Look,
like,
look, Mr. Kevin, when I dropped the flyer, there were people. So I don't know what struck last night, but last night I put the post up that I was excited about today. And then I had just thrown the flyer down in the comments for, for everybody. And people were like, oh my gosh, he looks like Frederick Douglass. They were blown away. So,
"Yeah, about four. What was it? I think I went to my 40th high school reunion. About that was '79, so that was 2019. And what I did, I let my hair grow out, because one of the reasons why I let my hair grow out long enough that I can braid it. So that was my testament to say, well, I can still grow my hair long enough to French braid it like I did when I was in high school. Um, but yeah, I had my hair out longer, so it was kind of like I kind of like had that more of, in my beard doesn't get real full, so I don't. It gets real raggedy, so I don't let it grow long because it just doesn't. So I keep it short. But yeah, I guess as I get older, that I just start to morph into. And people say, "Why don't you dress up and do?" And I'm like, in all seriousness, it is that spirit in me is that I do not want to ever do the like
Impersonations of him.
reenactment or impersonation of
Yeah.
Frederick Douglass. It's just too personal to
Too
me.
personal. Yeah.
To me, it's
Absolutely.
just that's just one of the things that
Absolutely.
now as a reenactor. So I mean, I do something every summer as a USCT soldier here at our local cemetery, where I do Sergeant William Holland, who was a United States colored troop, and nice story here locally. But I do his living history story. Um, and people always give me lots of comments on how I do it and make it personable. But yeah, as far as Frederick Douglass goes, I mean, there's so many people out there that have the passion of doing Frederick Douglass as reenactors. I just let them do it, and I do my thing as a descendant. I'm a descendant.
Absolutely. I love it. I love
Yeah.
it. I love it. I love it. So I'm gonna come back to the Black entrepreneurship question. That's the one I was trying to. I'm like, did I?
Thank you,
That's my
Bernadine.
that's my mom.
That's your, thank you,
That's my
Mama.
mom. So we said, okay, so we have Black entrepreneurship has increased significantly over the past few years. How can Black entrepreneurship transform legacies and financial wealth in our community?
Well, that's interesting because as a matter of fact, my wife is a Black entrepreneur. My sister-in-law is also.
Oh,
My
I
sister-in-law
love it.
has Lily B's Sweets. She does cakes and popcorn. Lily
Really
B's.
cool.
Yeah, yeah, look at that one. Lily B's. And my wife is Body and Soul Teas, herbal teas. So
Hmm.
my wife just started about 2 years ago. I think it was January 2 years ago. She started her herbal tea company, and as she said, she did it out of a personal need. She just based on some of her health. She started going to a herbal more herbal based
Mm-hmm.
regimen
Mm-hmm.
for her health, and so she's decided to start doing. She's a tea mistress, so she blends her own teas.
Oh my God.
Some she grows, and some she has to buy some stuff, order stuff because they just don't make it. But here, but she's actually studying to be an herbalist. So she's
Oh
been going
my
through
gosh.
an actual course to be an herbalist. So um, it is interesting, just watching the dynamic of being because I've watched my sister-in-law do it too to
Mm-hmm.
um, because they don't they both don't have storefronts, they do quite a bit of the what you call it markets, not flea
Farmers
markets,
markets and
farmers
local farmers
markets.
markets. Mm-hmm.
Farmers markets and that's my wife does more of that, but my sister-in-law, she does more of the craft show type things
Mm-hmm.
with her
Mm-hmm.
sweets. Um, it's just to watch how they evolve with figuring out
Yeah.
their business piece of it,
Yes.
their
Yes.
working out the logistics of it, of because they first started out with the showier is more, and then they figure out, well,
Mm-hmm.
it takes a lot of stuff to bring all this stuff, pack all this
Mm-hmm.
stuff up, and
Mm-hmm.
blah
Mm-hmm.
blah blah. And now they got it down to where, yeah, to that the product is more important
I was gonna
than the
say if the product is worth it.
right
Yep.
than the
Yep.
show. So now yeah, my sister-in-law, people, I mean, she could sell out before showing up. She pre-orders, so she can sell out and have
So
everybody
inspiring.
order stuff and show
So,
up and come pick up the stuff, and she can be sitting there from 10 o'clock to 4 o'clock.
so inspiring. I love it.
but you're required to stay the whole. And she still has samples and stuff, so she's still, and she's very personable, so she'll talk to people and giggle with you, and she meets all the other vendors. And I think actually she is, and if I'm not mistaken, I think she's organizing an event on, when I say on her own, but I think she's becoming an event organizer now. My sister-in-law, Barb Walker. So, and then like I said, my wife, she started doing her stuff, and I support her on that. And so she's, how far it takes to actually make money compared to what you're putting into it without invest. So I'm the investor. So and I don't have, I don't have a
it
problem
takes
with
a
it, but
yeah,
but
it takes an
she
investment.
does, now that the all the other kids are gone, and my oldest or youngest is, and I'm here at home, and she's able to actually, while I'm here, she's able to do a lot of her work on
Absolutely.
supervised, that my wife is able to do some other stuff outside of the home too
I love
for
it.
money. So yeah, but she's able to, you know, and it was interesting because there was always different times that she thought about doing some stuff.
Right.
'Cause I remember she talked about maybe doing daycare in the home, and I was like, I mean, we had enough kids in our house on our own to bring other people's kids in, like for real. I mean, we would
Right,
do it when
right.
people needed, because they knew
Help.
that, it was interesting. My wife says, just because I'm a homeschooler, sometimes people think I ain't got nothing else to do. So, so they're like, okay, so can we bring our kid? We need a babysitter. Can we bring our kids by? And it was usually, people she knew well and respect would do that, not with the idea that, yeah, but she actually had some people that thought just because you homeschool, you ain't got nothing else to do.
That's exactly what they tend to think. That's
Yeah, that you're not going out, especially, when you have 5 kids. But one of the things about homeschooling, when my vacations wasn't geared around the school system.
right,
When it was
right,
time,
right,
when I
right.
decided to take leave and go somewhere, the kids came with us, and it
Yeah,
was
yeah,
and field those were field trips.
yeah, yep,
Those are
yep.
things that you can put down as classroom experience when you go
Absolutely,
visit
absolutely,
different places and stuff like that.
absolutely.
So
Valuable, very valuable
yeah,
opportunities.
yeah.
Very valuable. I love it. I love it. Well, I feel I've gone through pretty much anything, everything. Was there anything else you wanted to say?
No, but no, I don't know. I know we went through everything we wanted to talk about, and segued into different stuff. And so I'm glad uh, that we were actually able to take this extra time, because
I
how we
am.
do
I'm
so
so
many
thankful.
different things where you get deep into stuff. That's like
Yes.
the theme for Black History Month this year is black health and wellness. So at MTSU, we did our subcommittee was the committee. We sponsored a health and wellness panel with Black health professionals. So we had
I
two
love it.
doctors. I think we had some social workers and mental health care people,
I love it.
but we
I love
also had a health and wellness expo. So we had people of color
it. Love it.
who had businesses, small businesses that involved health and wellness down in the student union prior to the panel event. Um, but yeah, it was just nice to be able to um, get involved. Like I said,
Mhm.
as an alum with the school, gives me some
Mhm.
extra to do.
Mhm.
I'm really the only one on. Well, no, I'm not the only one. But on our subcommittee, I'm the only one who's not a staff at the school. Um, but it's just it's interesting, especially at this age, to be able to do stuff like I'm going to
Mhm.
Philadelphia next week. So matter of fact, and she'll kick me in the teeth if I don't. Uh, if I don't say this, that I'm going to the Hands Across Philadelphia
With Miss Nicole,
organization,
yeah.
because she called me
Yes,
right before I got on with you. She goes,
yes.
"You're getting ready to get on in a minute, aren't you?" I'm like, "Yeah, I am." She's
I
like,
love
"All
it.
right, don't embarrass me on
I
there."
love
So yeah, so Hands Across Philadelphia. I've been out there several different times, and we're always able to do trips where I'm able to give out books. I did a bookstore one time. Last time I was there, we went to a magnet school. I did a presentation of one of the books at the what's called the Union League, which is this very exclusive Republicans club there in Philadelphia. The Union, that's the Union of the United States with Abraham Lincoln, blah blah blah. But yeah, very very nice place. So we presented a book for their library, and that particular book I actually had signed by Nettie Washington Douglas, and Kenneth Morris Jr. of FDFI. They
it.
signed books and then send them to me, and I signed it. So they have a
That's
book in their
amazing.
library of three actual descendant
I
wet
love it.
signatures on
I
their
love
book.
it. That's amazing.
And then
That's am-
this next week I'm going out into a school. We ordered books for the school, and then there's the Black Veterans Organization there, and a couple other things. So when I'm out there, she organizes a lot of things for to that's valuable visits.
yes, yes,
And
yes, yes.
yeah.
Which is
So
why I can't wait to come up there to Philly because I know it's going to be such an invaluable experience.
yeah,
It's going to be
yeah.
so amazing.
So it's yeah.
Love it.
So that's pretty much where I think this. I've done more this year as far as Black history as I've done in a while. And there were times where I really didn't do. I think there might have been a couple of, since I retired, there might have been a couple of years where I didn't do anything publicly.
Right,
And to me,
right.
I'm all right with that. There are times where I tried to solicit to try to do things, to
Mm,
reach out and say I'm available, and then there was
mm.
times like, well, I mean, I still got my family, I still got a job, I
Exactly.
still got all these other things to do, and then I would go up to the university and when I say participate, I would be there for the different programs they had, just as
Right,
a person going to the programs, and not a
right,
board member.
right.
uh and then yeah, like I said, around town we might go to stuff and support it, and I'm okay with that. I don't have to, again, that pretty much goes back, I think, to where it takes me back to how I grew up. Is I don't have to be I mean, like I said, I don't have to be
I mean, yeah.
Douglas during Black History Month.
Yes,
I
yes,
don't. I mean,
yes.
and I don't have to be any other time of the year. But there are other time of
Absolutely,
the year where I am, where we do
absolutely,
stuff, and so that's
absolutely.
like I said, just like folks that I'm Black all year round. I'm Douglas all year round,
Oh,
but
yeah,
also I'm
365.
also I'm also green all year round too. So, and that's what one of the things you talked about, legacy and lineage, is that I think my kids the same way. They've been and seen me do things before.
Mhm,
Um,
mhm.
but again, it's going to be up to them to where they decide
How they want to do?
that
Yeah, I love
how
it.
they want to represent the legacy. So it's not
I love
anything that I've thrown on them. I just
it.
they have stuff here, because I think my son, I went to something at the school, and I mentioned, because I was giving away one of the books for student participation, and one of the professors said something about it, and I told, yeah, I'm Frederick Douglass, descendant, and he goes, and I said, matter of fact, yeah, my son goes to school here, and he goes, I think I had your son in my class because he was doing this this presentation or something, and he's blah 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 blah. He's talking blah blah, the descendant of Frederick Douglass, blah 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 blah. He just said it so just kind of like,
Nonchalantly.
and
Yeah.
the professor's like, well, whoa, wait a minute, back up. You said who? And so, it is like, wow, to him, but to my son is like, that's just who we are. I mean,
Yeah.
it's just
Yeah.
who I mean, it's, how I'm saying, it's not that that's just who I am, but that's just who I am.
This is
I do.
exactly. It makes
I
sense.
realize
Not
it's
to
something
yeah.
special. It's
Yeah.
special to you. It's special to me. But I'm
Yeah.
also want to be
It's,
special as my
it's,
as me.
it's absolutely, absolutely,
Yeah. So
absolutely. I get it. I get
okay.
it. I love it. I think that was just like the prime thing right there to say it's, it's special, but it's not special. I just want to be who I am, and that's it. Like recognizing the value of the legacy that was set before you, but also
Mhm.
saying that, I'm just a person that just so happened to be born into this,
Mhm.
and I've decided how I'm going to continue, and then that was up to my children to decide how they're going to continue. So I like that. I love it. I love it. That was
Yeah, because
excellent.
some how celebrities sometimes I would love to be a regular person. Sometimes again, some people
Because
get
they
so
can't. Yeah.
famous that they can't be
Yeah.
a regular person
Yeah.
anymore.
Yeah.
And I mean, I enjoy being able to still be a regular person,
Yeah.
especially, one of the things though is when you go home, people will always let you be a regular person.
Tell me
Unless
about.
unless
Oh yeah.
unless you're rich and they want money, that's I mean, so going home not rich is actually a whole lot easier too. Is that they'll let you be a regular person when
Family
you
will
come
always
home.
humble you.
Yeah, they'll remind you when was when you was yeah.
I
That's like
love
I got that's like a story I gotta give a shout out to one of my mentors. That's I mean he's I mean, very great person, but very. I mean, his father was a very humble person, but it's just that watching a person grow up and reach heights of And I'm segueing and I'm leaving some stuff out as I get to it, but just be able to do stuff that's special and to know this person as a regular person
That's very good.
is Coach Herman Edwards. He used to play for the Philadelphia Eagles, but he's coach at Arizona State University now. But I grew up next door to him, and so here's a man. He was, at this point, he would come home. He's a millionaire easily, but he'd come home, and his mom stayed in the same house because that's where she wanted to be
Mm-hmm.
until she could no longer stay there. But when he came home, first thing he did, he would park the car, go around the side of the house,
Right.
grab broom
Right.
and dustpan. He'd go out to the street and he would sweep the sidewalk. He would sweep the house above his and my house, which was next to it. He would sweep in front of our house. I mean, he did. I mean, he grew up doing this, and he would do
Mm-hmm.
this when he came home. So when it was like when he came home, he was home. So that's just one
Yeah.
of the things about him
Consistency.
that I've always admired is that he always just tries to tell people to be yourself. Don't try to outgrow yourself. I mean,
Absolutely. I love it.
some people need to outgrow themselves. So you understand. Some people just need to grow up, but sometimes you just you don't
But
need to
remain who you are.
you
Absolutely.
don't need to outgrow yourself when
Absolutely.
yourself was when you were something good and special. Don't ever outgrow that. So
Absolutely.
yeah, it's
Absolutely.
nice
I like that.
remembering. Yeah, he's a good memory about my childhood. So watching him do things and he's invested. When I say invested in me, is not only just as a man and person, just based on the things he did and watched him carrying himself, but just supporting me with asking him for maybe something special every once in a while to help support something, because he did something to help support Frederick Douglass Family Initiatives
I
not
love
too
it.
long ago, and I asked him, and he helped me with that to do something. So
I love it. It's
yeah,
amazing.
so I just want, I mean, again, I just want, and if any of my Seaside Posse members, that's our Facebook thing, my Seaside Posse. Uh, and if any of y'all out there, just let's, you tell everybody, you go on and just ping me on Facebook. Kevin Green shouted out Seaside so many different times in this thing that because a lot of times when I'm around people, because most people recognize when you say Monterey, California, Pebble
Okay.
Beach, Carmel,
Okay.
that pings in people's head. And then you have those who have been there, and then they say, okay, so you Fort Ord Seaside? And I say, yeah, see, I grew up in Seaside. So now you can get into real conversations when someone can say Fort Ord Seaside.
Right.
That's way that that they've most likely been there, and then you can get into real conversations.
Then it gets real.
Then it gets real. It's like, yeah,
Then it gets
I
real.
grew up in Seaside, just Highland Street, just off of Broadway, and
I love
went to
it.
Martin Luther King Junior High School.
I
So
love it.
yeah,
I love it. Well,
man.
I'm
So
gonna go
I
ahead.
I really thank you for just letting me talk.
No, no problem. We have thoroughly enjoyed it. Very, very thankful for the opportunity to talk with you, listen to the stories, the wisdom, things that we can take with us, and really just a very, very welcoming spirit to all people. And I think that that's something that everybody needs right now because of all the times that people are facing. Um, Trying to make it through a pandemic, trying to survive, what we're seeing in the news and media. Just each day, we need to be in the presence of people who just provide a space for us to enjoy good conversation, good spirits that move us forward. So
Mhm.
it's been my honor to have you today. And if you ever want to come back, I just want to. You are absolutely welcome.
No,
Um,
I really did enjoy this conversation. So
Thank you,
it
thank
was
you.
a lot of fun and inciting. Is that the right
Okay.
word? Anyway, and of course, it's nice to when people make you think. Because I mean, I don't get into conversations like this a whole lot, but it's nice just to be able to have conversations and think and talk
Absolutely.
about stuff.
Mhm.
To do for this is the first. Hmm. Yeah, that's the right on statement. Yeah,
So
it's
one of the
right on.
greatest honors of this is that Chris actually went to one of the schools where I taught, and he's a young college educated man now doing some great things. And so it's been exciting to me as well to just watch him engage, and I could tell he's really enjoyed this and digging into that rhetoric. And I'm gonna tell you, I don't care what anybody else says, that engagement, rhetoric, and intellectualism among Black men hits differently, just because of the way that society often portrays them. So I've been enjoying, just seeing you respond to those questions and read and engage with, because I've enjoyed that, so
Hmm.
it's been just very refreshing,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
everything. So of course, I'm gonna close out. I usually
Okay.
close out with a piece, and so tonight I'm actually gonna do a piece I've done before, and everybody here following you guys pretty much know grandmother's story is one I wrote a while back, but I felt like grandmother's story is so befitting tonight since we're talking about legacies, and that how important it is for us to remember that we carry those torches, and basically what Mr. Kevin has said is we get to choose how we do that. How does carrying that torch look for us? So I want to share with you guys grandmother's story. My grandmother told me she quit school in the eighth grade. The cotton needed picking and the kids needed feeding. And in those days, that's just the way things was. She chuckled a little and then asked me if I could teach her to read. I reckon I can read, but I just don't understand much, she told me. And a tear rolled down my cheek. For the many ancestors like my grandmother, whose heads hold more stories than their hands can write, whose fingers curve around pens that write words they can barely pronounce. Oh, grandmother. So often have I taken advantage of the way 3 and 4 syllable words roll off my tongue with ease. All the times I opted for less words with more pictures because my vocabulary was large, but my patience was short. How many times did I abuse the beauty of language, using it to harm or belittle or destroy others with the same words you could barely read? How selfish of me to boast of the things I knew with no regard for the things you didn't. And you worked in the fields for me, so my hands would never know the pricks of cotton bristles. So I would never know the weariness of long days or short nights or a fifth season called harvesting. And there's no need to teach you when you, in fact, are the teacher, grandmother. So I shall read to you until my throat dries up and feels like, excuse me, and feels with cotton, like, and cotton fills my cheeks the way it used to feel the cotton sack you dragged between your fingers for me. I will read until my voice cracks more than your knuckles after a long day of cooking for 11 kids, your husband, and the white family who barely paid you enough to feed yourself. I will read so loudly that my ancestors will know my freedom is ringing. For every book my ancestors were denied, I will read for you, grandmother. And then I will tell your story. I will write until arthritis cripples my fingers the way it made yours lock up from scrubbing wooden floors and hand washing clothes. I will write until I have given every last ounce of energy, like you did so many days and nights for me. I know times have changed, but history still remains the same. And ain't it funny, grandmother, that you can barely read the book, but you tell the story so well? I want to thank you so much, Mr. Kevin, for coming tonight. It has really been a very wonderful experience. I explained to you again what I said at first. When I was a little girl, the autobiography of Frederick Douglass was the first novel I read and one of the first books that I had the chance to actually learn about in terms of Black history figures. Dr. Martin Luther King, Dr. Maya Angelou, and Frederick Douglass. And they've all made big impacts on my life and what I get to do as a writer and speaker and understanding the power and value of education. It is so important to history and society that we never forget people like Frederick Douglass, who sacrificed a lot and risked a lot to ensure that Black voices were elevated and that we are free as we are today. And I appreciate you for making it your responsibility to share these stories, to push us to feel empowered and free, and to live in the freedom that our ancestors have given us. And I wish you all the best. If there's anything that I can do for you, if you want to come back on the intellectualism, the Black intellectualism movement at any point, you are always welcome. But I cannot express how much I have appreciated and enjoyed you tonight, and I hope our audience has done the same.
Well, thank you. Yeah, it was a great experience. I mean, it was one thing I was thinking about. One again before I forget, I wanted to thank you for your ability to help me get more books out to the kids. And just I mean, I think as valuable as that contribution was, I think I really appreciate this conversation just as much as that. Um, I mean, I'd do this conversation without it, and it still be just as valuable. But with the work you're doing with these conversations and is so valuable. But right before I close, I had mentioned at the beginning is that the story of Frederick Douglass is really Frederick. When we say that without Anna Murray Douglass, there is no Frederick Douglass, because he was Frederick Augustus Washington Bailey at the time he escaped, and my great great grandmother helped him as a free woman to be able to, and encouraged him to make that escape,
I know.
and joined him later. So there's, so the story of Anna is becoming, like I say, a narrative within itself, and people like Erica Mook of the director of Frederick Douglass Family Initiative, Michelle and Eric Daniels in Rochester, New York, with the murals that they're helping to have erected. I mean, the one that's in the Frederick Douglass Rochester International Airport. Now, I mean, that's, to say that when I flew
I
in there
know.
in
I
December is
know.
like,
I know.
what's interesting though, and I hate to, but is I was on the plane, man. I was like, yeah, we're coming. I was like, yeah, we're coming. And it was interesting because I fly Southwest, and sometimes it all depends on the who you have, the, not stewardess, but whatever you call them now, but stewardess, okay.
Hey, we're fine.
You have these pep, these real excited ones, and
Yeah,
sometimes
yeah,
it's
yeah.
like, all right, my shift's almost over type thing. And so the lady I told when I got on the plane, I was like, I know her because I was leaving Baltimore going up to Rochester, and I got on the plane. I said, I am so excited today. I said, because we're flying in the Frederick Douglass International Airport, and I'm a descendant. And she goes, oh, that's nice. And again, it's kind of like that thing, like, well, you can't always expect everybody to be as
Right,
excited
right,
about
right,
who
right.
you are
As you
as
feel,
you are.
right, right, right,
And
right,
it was like, man, why couldn't I have one of those days where, you get on, you have those ones where sometimes they say, hey, we got this guy who's gonna sing a song for us. And I was just, in my mind, I was thinking,
right,
okay, I'm gonna
right.
tell somebody who's gonna get on
How
the
you
mic
feel?
and tell
Yeah,
everybody that we got the Senator Frederick Douglass flying into
yeah, yeah.
Rochester Frederick Douglass International Airport for the first time, and everybody's gonna go, yay! And it was like, oh
Wanting them to
well,
share that moment with you, and she just look. You just wanted
yeah,
them to share that moment with you
yeah,
because it felt so
yeah.
good. She was like,
She was like,
"Bam, okay."
okay. I was like, thank you. I was like, oh well. And then I just went into the airport.
I
I
love it.
mean, I just got off the plane, went to the
I love
airport, just like everybody else. Like, all right, well, I guess my own little secret, but still proud. Still,
it. No, we have all been there when we have these big moments. We want everybody to celebrate with us,
yeah.
and then it just falls flat, and we're just like, okay,
Oh
well.
man, I was like, then I was thinking, man, I should have flew Spirit, because the last time I was there, the whole plane was. I didn't fly with them, but I seen when I was leaving the hotel in Philly, getting ready to go back home. I got on the bus, the shuttle, and the whole staff, the whole flight crew for Spirit was black. Coming from the airport, and I was like, "Dang, why didn't I have them? At least they would have appreciated it."
Hurt your feelings a little bit. I don't care what people say. Hurt your feelings a
Yeah,
little bit.
yeah, man,
Like,
it's all right.
well, I was excited, so
Yeah.
okay.
Okay.
I love it. I love it. I
Yeah.
love
All right. Well, we need to. I know my wife got to leave at 3 o'clock in the morning to go down to this memorial service in
it.
Alabama.
Yeah.
So
Yes. We send our warm wishes, prayers, and condolences for her as well.
thank you, thank you.
Absolutely. Well, have a good night, Mr. Kevin. I'm so happy to talk with you. And of course, this video is available on my page. I was trying to look up your page before we started, but a whole list of Douglass-Greene's popped
What
up. So,
what was that? The
on
my
Facebook, I was trying to
Oh
look it
yeah,
up.
I don't, because I don't think I have mine open for what you
So,
call it.
well, I'm gonna send you the link or the link for replay. Where you actually have it, so you'll be able to check the link out for replay. Share it with anyone
Hmm.
that you might want to see it, or whatever you'd like to do with it. And so it's been a
I
fantastic
can,
night.
and I will. friend you on Facebook.
Okay. Okay. Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I will accept it once you do. And
Okay.
I
Yeah.
send you our warm wishes, and you have a great night.
Thank you. You too. Appreciate it so much. Bye,
Bye.
Mama.
Oh, she's gonna love that.
That's good.